Okay, it is 7 o'clock, so we are going to go ahead and I'm going to call this meeting of the Board of Education to order. If we could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the
republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and
liberty
justice for all. Thank you. All right, the first order of business is our consent agenda. Can I get a motion to accept the consent agenda? Ms. Stowe, is there a second? Ms. Hirsch. All right, all those in favor, we're going to have to take a roll call vote because we've got somebody online. So Bernstein is a yes. Francis?
Yes.
Hirsch?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
I don't see Karen Kowalski is going to be late. I don't see Peter. Peter, we're taking a vote on the consent agenda, so I'll give you a second to get to your seat. And Stowe?
Yes.
Peter, did you want to vote on the consent agenda? Sure. Okay. All right, and Mr. Scher, who's in the room, is a yes. That passes 7-0, actually 6-0, sorry. Ms. Kowalski will be with us, and Ms. Downey is unfortunately absent this evening. We're going to move on to our public hearing. So the first is the GHS student government comments. So I don't know if we have Kwame and Javi. All right, we'll give them a moment.
Zane's here, yeah, because he hasn't left for college.
If you could please put your mask on in the back of the room. You need to put your mask on. It's required by state law. Sorry. We're just waiting for our student government guys to get inside. So if you give us a moment. Kwame and Javi, if you can come right down to the podium, we're ready for you. All right, Javi, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Good evening, board members. I'm Javi Serra, senior class president at Greenwich High School. I can't express how excited we all are to be fully in person once again. Granted, this is still not a normal year. It's nice to finally be done with Google Meets. On that note of normalcy, we have begun planning homecoming. Our VP of Special Events, Angelica Veronis, has been busy in her efforts to create a vibrant school unifying week. It's been proposed to move away from the stale low attendance dance to a more exciting event, such as a tailgate or drive-in movie, or even a homecoming event specifically for freshmen to provide their class with an opportunity to get to know one another. We're also working on bringing back the vibrant pep rally for this year, possibly utilizing our new Cardinal Stadium, if construction permits. One of student government's priorities for this year is to rebuild our school community once again. After 2 years of being partially online, we hope to revive our diverse school climate to its former glory. Speaking of, our once lively student center has turned into a sterile open area filled with clear plexiglass dividers. While everyone is grateful to be in person, this student center has been a concern for many. It has become near impossible to socialize with multiple friends during lunch due to these thick barriers. I, along with my peers, understand that these dividers are in place as a mitigation strategy in order to keep us in the building. But as vaccination numbers continue to increase and infection rates decrease, I hope to continue to work alongside administrators, Chairman Bernstein, and Dr. Jones in exploring other avenues that protect the student body's physical health and emotional well-being. In order to ensure that student voices are heard, student government has changed its application process for this year. There are 16 homerooms scheduled, and each homeroom will have a representative in the student government. They will attend student government meetings, address the concerns of their peers, and relay information back to their respective homerooms. This refined process ensures that every GHS student has an accessible outlet to have their voices heard through student government. The past 3 semesters of GHS learning have been difficult to say the least, but I, like my peers, am eager to move forward. On behalf of my peers, I want to thank the board, administration, teachers, and all staff for their tireless efforts to fully reopen schools this year. I will now pass the mic to our student body president, Kwame Boateng.
Good evening, board members. I'm Kwame Boateng, student body president of Greenwich High School. I would like to echo the sentiments of Javi in stating how grateful I am, not only to meet in person, but to be able to return to a school full of students, faculty, and culture in light of a turbulent pandemic year. Although we are not fully out of the woods yet, I have great confidence that the diligence of our school system in keeping us safe and healthy will usher us into a vibrant spring semester. I mentioned the diligence of the Greenwich Public Schools in keeping us healthy, but I believe I was perhaps not clear enough in this claim. Javi previously mentioned the distinction between the student body's physical and mental well-being. I believe that our faculty does an outstanding job of keeping students physically safe, from contact tracing to traffic flow. All of the mitigation efforts have been extremely effective in containing the spread of COVID throughout the high school. Although the threat COVID poses to the physical well-being of students is immense, there are also social and emotional challenges quietly growing in our student center. In the same manner that I echoed Javi's excitement to return to school this year, I would similarly like to echo my disappointment with the plexiglass dividers that are still on the tables of our student centers. An integral component of a student's social emotional health is being able to gather with friends in the student center. This year, it's nearly impossible to talk and hang out with peers before school, during lunch, and during open blocks due to the current configuration and protocols. Ultimately, we acknowledge that these dividers have been put in place as a mitigation strategy in order to keep us physically safe. However, I urge that we as a student body, alongside administrators, Chairman Bernstein, and Dr. Jones, continually monitor the pandemic in order to determine whether the plexiglass dividers can be removed in the second semester in order to support our social and emotional well-being. Looking forward, our goal as student body representatives is to assimilate the underclassmen with upperclassmen. Given the past 2 unprecedented years, it is imperative that we use this year as an opportunity to smoothly transition our disconnected community back to in-person school and unify the student body. We have the unique opportunity to build new traditions and take on new initiatives. I plan to achieve these goals through 1, reimagining the design and culture of the Student Center. 2, increasing student engagement through fun school-wide activities and increased communication over social media. 3, having Cardinal Cafe improvements. And 4, making adjustments to the midterm and final exams. With clear goals in mind, I'm optimistic about the progress our school can make by the end of the year. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to speaking at future Board of Education meetings.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. All right, the next is GEA comments. So Lil Perone.
Hey, Zane. Good to see you. Good evening, board members, cabinet, parents, and GEA who is watching out there. My name is Lillian Perone. I'm very excited to be back again as president of GEA. Although I have never physically lived in Greenwich, I've spent most of my life here performing and working in many roles and capacities, from teaching at all 3 levels, working with our private schools, volunteering as a BLS instructor for the Red Cross, GEMS, our Greenwich Emergency Medical System, as a coach, team mentor, state reviewer, GHS department head, district lead teacher, and now back again as my second time around as your GEA president. In 1983, I was first hired by GPS as a science teacher and taught at the Western Middle School. My principal at the time was Don Strange. He was a great administrator, leader, and a mentor to me. From there, I went on to see my master's in health education, a 6th year in educational leadership, and also my own 92 administrator license. I've now come full circle, and I'm president once again. Reflecting back in 2003, when I was president, we also experienced many hardships that closed down our schools or interrupted the learning process. The mercury spill at Western, the black mold at Eastern, Hamilton Ave issues that ended into a new school building, and Glenver modules, just to name a few. Yes, it was hard work, but as a community of leaders, we came to the table and discussed the issues and focused on what was best for students. We got it done together. Now, in 2020, we're all living through something that I could not even imagine. Everyone in our community, state, country, and the world has been impacted. Yes, last year was very hard, but we did it. We're the only district that were in school all year. When I walked into the buildings last year, what I saw was just short of a miracle. I could not believe the eyes of what was accomplished and put in place to get our schools ready and open. So I would like to start my first speech of the year with thank yous that I don't think I've heard enough. I want to thank the administrators for their hard work over the summer to get the schools open and ready. Thank you to our custodians and school support staff for getting our buildings clean and ready. Thank you to our IT staff who worked so hard to get our student staff and buildings supplied and running with technology. Thank you to our security staff for keeping us safe and making sure protocols were followed. Thank you to our PTAs for supporting our schools and students. Thank you to our students who are really great with following our safety protocols and trying to do the best they could. Thank you for our parents for helping to support the learning process when we had to pivot. Thank you to my GA teachers. I know how hard it was, and I want to thank you. I too myself lived through it. It was physically and mentally draining. To be an expert in your trade and instructional practices, and then having to pivot and learn new ways of teaching, new technological skills, new ways to plan and implement instruction. At the same time, many of you dealing with your own families and child's learning too. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you to my executive board who worked many hours over the summer with Dr. Jones and I during to get things ready for students and staff. In fact, when I first met Dr. Jones this summer, I shared my vision and more importantly, my plan about the actions and directions that I will be leading GEA this year. I shared a Henry Ford quote, "To have a vision with no plan is just a hallucination." Well, there'll be no hallucinating here today or for the year, I tell you that. GEA has already come to the table and will continue to be at the table, not with complaints, but as problem solvers. I've been consulting with my expert teachers in the areas and have been meeting and sharing our knowledge and expertise with administration, working together to do what is best for our students and staff. I know some of you have heard this before. That which you tolerate, you accept, and that which you accept becomes the practice. I also state this. As the president of the largest and most powerful unit in Greenwich, GEA will not tolerate, accept personal attacks against our teachers, our administrators, or our board. It will never be accepted, and that will never be a practice or a new practice against anyone in Greenwich that is serving our students. I'd like to end on a more positive note. Thank you, Dr. Jones. This year, for the first time, Dr. Jones and I has traveled together to all our schools. We bought t-shirts from the Greenwich Alliance that were provided. We walked the halls. We checked in on teachers. We were there to answer questions and provide support. We will complete our last school visit on October 6th at GHS together. I like to judge people on their actions and not their words. In my 35 years here in Greenwich, I have never worked with a superintendent with such a work ethic, and I have worked with all of the superintendents in the past 12 years. I want to thank you, Dr. Jones. I look forward to our collaborative relationship. We are stronger together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lil. Next, I'm sorry, we have an agenda. We will get to the public hearing in a moment. Next up is PTA Council. I think I see Mimi Duff online.
Is that working? Can you hear me?
Yes, you can go ahead.
Okay. I am Mimi Duff, President of PTA Council, representing the 15 school PTAs and the families of all of their members. I want to start by saying how grateful we are to have our kids back in school, learning in person safely with their peers and teachers. We understand the ongoing Herculean efforts that Dr. Jones, the administration, nursing, custodial, cafeteria, and other staff, as well as all of our teachers, have gone through to make this happen. So I start with a warm and resounding thank you. Next, I want to express our desire for the Board of Ed meetings to remain forever accessible virtually. So many of us are working parents, and we appreciate the opportunity to stay involved. I'd also like to ask that the Board of Ed docs get posted in a more timely manner. This allows us to be more thoughtfully engaged. Now onto the meat of my comments. Wow, we are stunned by the amount of work that was done over the summer, and we were thrilled to receive the updates in the last board meeting on curriculum in math, science, ELA, and foreign languages, as well as the SPED action planning. Our interactions with the new coordinators have been excellent. Please let us know how we can help. We solidly appreciate the move toward greater transparency and consistency. In terms of previous gripes, we are thrilled to see that the Chromebook performance issues have been addressed and that ALP participation is being looked into. We continue to request that documents related to the Board of Ed data requests get posted to board docs so the community can stay engaged. Bringing the focus to today, with respect to this year's agenda plan, we are hoping for more curriculum updates in addition to ALP, STEM, and math. Specifically, we're hopeful that you will be adding language arts and social sciences updates with a focus on updates for writing programs in the middle school, which have been a focus of concern in the past. Looking to October, we look forward to seeing the achievement data report, as well as hearing an update on ALP. Our teams are excited to be working with the district on improving communication and transparency. One area of concern that continues to be voiced within the community is traffic. The areas around the high school, Coscob, and North Street are of primary concern, and we fear that road work on the post road will make matters worse. If potential resolutions are discussed, PTAC would love to be involved to help provide coordinated feedback. So what's going on in PTAC? Along with the usual awesome stuff, we wanted to share that we have 3 special committees. They are the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, a Facility Committee, and a Student Activity Committee. The descriptions for these, as well as our other committees, are on the website. We too are trying to be more systematic and transparent and welcome input. Did you know that we have a public portion to each of our PTAC meetings and that we host approximately 6 academic excellence workshops each year, which are great opportunities to learn about district curriculum? We're aiming to record these and build a library of resources. We are also co-hosting a virtual Board of Ed candidate debate with the League of Women Voters Greenwich and the Alliance on October 19th, 7 p.m. Stay tuned for more details. I'll stop here. Thank you again to our superintendent and the Board of Education. We are all in this together for the betterment of our children.
Thank you very much, Mimi. All right, next up is our community comments. We have 18 speakers signed up. According to our posted meeting notice, we're going to have 1 hour of comments now, and the rest. Sorry, Aaron, can we turn that up? Thank you. All right, we've got 18 people signed up as of our noon deadline per our meeting notice. We've got 1 hour of public comments now. We hopefully can fit everybody in. We would do the rest after the meeting, but if everybody's respectful, we can get this done. Per our policy, each speaker gets 3 minutes. There is a timer. Please abide by the timer. If you go over, we will turn the microphone off, and we would ask that you please stop speaking, and you can submit the rest of your comments via email to the board. All right. Now, look, we want people to be respectful, okay? If we have a disruption, we might ask the people to leave. If that doesn't work, under our policy, we would have to clear the room. We would continue our meeting, and folks would be able to continue to watch via Zoom. We don't want to have to do that. So again, okay, I'm speaking directly into the mic. Aaron, we got max volume. Yeah, okay, that's lovely. Thank you, folks. You're already being disruptive. If we have to clear the room, we will do that. That is what I said, and you heard it. Be civil. Speakers are asked to express themselves in a civil manner with due respect for the dignity and privacy of others who may be affected by their comments. While it's not the board's intent to stifle public comment, speakers should be aware that if their statements violate the rights of others under the law of defamation or invasion of privacy, the speaker may be held legally responsible. Speakers unsure of the legal ramification of what they're about to say are urged to consult first with their legal advisor. Again, we're asking you to be civil. We are here to hear. We are going to listen. We ask that you please treat each speaker with respect as you want to be treated. With that, we're going to start the first speak. We will call people by agenda items first in the order they signed up, and then non-agenda items. The first speaker is Jackie Homan.
At the last in-person board meeting, Tony Jones used police to stop me from sharing a poster with my son's English assignment. I was told the poster was too offensive for parents, but suitable for my son. One of the quotes that bothered me was, "Women are all whores." I also disapproved of the graphic imagery of abuse, which included a man's penis as he peed on the back of a person forced onto his knees on the ground. When I complained about the assignment, I was told it was thought-provoking. When I raised the issue about it to the board in June, nothing was done. Instead, the next day at a PTAC meeting, Chairman Bernstein mocked me and other parents who spoke at the June meeting as just wanting to hear ourselves speak and didn't show any concern about the issues we raised. I found the arrogance of the chairman and of the board in general on this issue to be appalling. And so I took it upon myself to conduct a survey to understand how many people were aware of the issues with the curriculum and how they really felt about it. Nearly 200 of the 1,500 parents surveyed submitted answers to the 2 questions before Tony Jones sent an email designed to stop parents from participating. These are the same bully tactics you use to push your one-sided pro-vaccination views, encouraging parents to sign their children up for dangerous shot experiments. The shot that the FDA revealed in last Friday's meeting is killing 2 people for every 1 person it allegedly saves. The same shot the FDA also added a myocarditis warning to the label for. You are not doing your homework. I'm sorry, I missed my page. Nonetheless, the feedback represents 2% of the parents in town. If we had had the opportunity to sample all the parents in town, and if you were able to assume a similar response rate and a similar mix of responses, 10% of parents would support the views summarized in the presentation findings I shared with you, and they're on the table out there tonight. When asked about the presentation, Mark D'Amico said it was difficult to hear, but not wrong. Parents organized a sign campaign to help raise awareness on the several key themes that arose from the survey. And when I placed a sign in the ground at Eastern to indicate where we were meeting to pass out signs, Tony Jones sent the police again. She alleged the sign was placed illegally, which it wasn't, but this is now the 2nd time she's used police to threaten me. These are the same bully tactics the school is using to push face masks and other useless COVID mitigation tactics. We all know that your teachers and administrators mock the face mask rules in private and flaunt their naked faces on social media while you enforce a harmful, anti-science, anti-human face mask policy on children who are not the problem. These are the same bully tactics you use to push your one-sided pro-vaccination views, encouraging parents to sign their children up for the dangerous COVID shot experiment. The shot that the FDA revealed in last Friday's meeting is killing 2 people for every 1 person it allegedly
30
saves.
seconds.
The same shot that the FDA also added a myocarditis warning to the label for. You are not doing your homework. And I know that because the FOIA results showed that you didn't do your homework. You're pushing dangerous policies. You're legally out of compliance with state laws with respect to approval of curricular materials. Parents are fed up. Parents called the shots on what's best for our children, and that's it. You either need to fire the teachers and administrators who broke the mask mandate or end the mask mandate now.
Time.
You need to shut down the vaccine clinics, and you need to immediately review
Thank
all
you very
curricular
much,
materials
Erin.
to ensure compliance.
Thank you. That's your 3 minutes, Ms. Homan. Other people are signed up to speak. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. If you do this, not everybody gets an opportunity to speak. Thank you. The next speaker is Katie Yu. Next speaker is Katie Yu. Katie? You're up.
Good evening. In the interest of respecting everyone's time, I'm just going to skip the formalities. So sorry. Is this better? And jump right in. First off, I'd like to extend a welcome to our new curriculum heads at Havemeyer and thank them for their work over the summer and the energy they're bringing to our district. Welcome. Excuse me. With regard to Dr. Reed's presentation about acceleration within math, this is a welcome change. However, I would second Dr. Francis's comment about making sure that GHS is properly outfitted to continue this trajectory. As Dr. Reed pointed out, students will now have the ability to advance as far as Algebra 2 honors in the middle school. This means that there could be an even larger number of students exhausting our high school's math curriculum. As a parent who witnessed the pure joy of working with like-minded peers in classes such as BC Calc and Ad Calc, and then experiencing the drop-off of having to take an online freeware course such as those offered at MIT, I would strongly recommend that we consider adding linear algebra and differential equations, or possibly pursuing a partnership with local colleges such as Manhattanville for students to attend classes with like-minded peers, either online or in person. Secondly, here is a test. In approaching infinity, the integral open parentheses derivative of x over x equals ln of z plus c. Were you able to hear me? No. I understand and support the decision of our administration to keep students and staff safe, especially with the highly contagious Delta variant. However, what creative options can we offer to ensure effective delivery of instruction? This is a particular concern for 2E kids, many of whom struggle with focus and can be easily distracted. Many 2E kids also really struggle already with wearing a mask from a sensory perspective. Please consider these kids, especially at the high school, where complex and multi-step theorems and theories are discussed every day. AP level classes, where pacing is very fast and where understanding every spoken word is crucial. What alternative kinds of options can we offer teachers, such as face shields or teaching behind plexiglass? Can we supplement learning through written transcripts of classes or recording classes so students can listen later for items they may have missed? For specific populations, the CDC suggests transparent masks as an option. Many teachers at GHS do not have the benefit of the device, such as the one I'm using right now, for you to hear what I'm saying. This issue is obviously very broad and affects all students. If this is our new normal, we have to think about this in a way that makes it work and doesn't hamper
30
learning.
seconds.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mariana Begonia.
Ready? Okay. My name is Mariana Begonia. I was born and raised here. I have 3 children in Greenwich Public Schools. I am a state employee. I used to work in this district. I've come to speak about the mandate you have imposed on workers. You are choosing to follow the mandates and guidelines because you are being incentivized to. It is why you have ignored the data for the last 1.5 years. It is why you continue to suffocate our children with your mask mandates. It's about your politics, not about health and safety. You collect state and federal funding on the condition that you make every effort to intimidate us and strip us of our rights and medical freedoms. You're also getting paid to indoctrinate our children. I saw the guidance from the regime. I have the document on what to do about non-vaccinated workers, the intimidation tactics, the withholding of pay for non-compliance, the weekly testing, even with a medical exemption that can cost up to $200 per test. Not covered by insurance and no reimbursements. You're not firing us. You're just not paying us until we comply. And you're making sure that it hits us hard financially with weekly testing. Proceeding with any aspect of this mandate is unlawful and inhumane. We also know that the main reason for pushing forward with this is to apply the same guidance on our poor children Now you have vaccine clinics on school grounds that don't require ID or parental consent. You are actively working to build a segregated school community. There is no.
Excuse me,
state of
please, if you're
emergency.
disruptive, you're going to have to leave the room.
There is
Okay.
no
Sir,
state of
please stop.
emergency.
Please stop. If you're disruptive, you're going to have to leave. Okay, sir, can you please leave? We'd like to continue the conversation with this person. Thank you. Go ahead.
Excuse me, sorry. There is no state of emergency. There hasn't been one in over a year. We are the highest vaccinated state in the nation. It's over. We've all been through so much. I worked in the sped department. I love my coworkers. I love this district. And I just don't understand why you guys are ignoring us. I just don't get it.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mariah Miklojic. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Mariah? I'm sorry, Marija. Maria, maybe? Okay, well, we're going to move on to our next speaker. If she'd like, she can go and join in by Zoom and we could admit her. Thank you. All right, the next speaker is Gail Lauridsen.
Before I start, I
Can you
saw
come to
that-
the microphone, please?
I just have to ask you a question. I'm not starting yet, but I saw in your documentation that teachers can take their masks off to speak to students.
I'm sorry, that doesn't apply to this forum.
So I
So
wondered-
we're going to start the timer. Please speak with your mask on. If you don't have your mask on, you're going to have to go.
Just thought I'd ask. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Well,
See,
there-
I'm not trying to be disrespectful,
Please pull
sir,
your mask up, ma'am.
but it seems like you are.
Okay,
so
please
I'm
pull
just
your,
trying
please
to
pull your
not-
mask up.
Yeah, I'm
Thank you.
getting there. Okay, sorry.
Please pull your mask up.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Please be respectful.
I'm trying to be respectful, sir. Okay, it was a question. My name is Gail Lauridsen. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. All statements I am about to make are on public record, detailed in 2 emails that I sent to the Board of Education, the last one yesterday, with data and sources. These are not opinions, but facts rooted in science and law. Masks are ineffective, potentially harmful, and only authorized for use by an emergency use authorization. First, the science. A virus particle is too small to be stopped by a surgical or cloth mask. Bacteria are 50 times larger than virus particles and remain trapped inside the mask, resulting in continual exposure to the bacteria. The vast majority of influenza deaths in 1918 resulted from secondary bacterial pneumonia. Masks interfere with task performances, efficiency, and can cause life-threatening conditions like hypoxemia, which is low blood oxygen, and hypercapnia, which is elevated carbon dioxide levels. Emotional connections are important to the well-being of children. Masks make them difficult at best and impossible for some. Children with a mortality rate of 0.00003 are not drivers of contagion. Asymptomatic transmission is a myth. The cost benefit makes a mask mandate impossible to justify. You are willfully ignoring established science. Now the legal. COVID mask use is authorized for emergency use only because the products are investigational and experimental. This clinical research requires informed consent and the right to refuse. The right to refuse, the right to avoid human experimentation is rooted in the Nuremberg Code of 1947, ratified by the 1964 Declaration of Helsinki, codified in the US Code of Federal Regulations, and adopted by the FDA. The law is clear. It is unlawful to conduct medical research, even in an emergency, unless steps are taken to secure informed consent. Misrepresenting the use of a mask for use as infection prevention or reduction is a deceptive practice under the Federal Trade Commission. There is no waiver of liability under deceptive practices, even under a state of emergency. As such,
30
forcing
seconds.
children to wear masks is illegal and immoral. I understand the $10 million in ESSER funding comes with a requirement for universal and correct wearing of masks. Those are the exact words that I saw maybe 12 times on documentation. I also understand that you are required to seek public input and that you have the opportunity to review and revise your plans. Now that you have been put on notice multiple times of the scientific and legal charges against the mask mandate, it is your duty to repeal the
Time.
mandate and to report
Thank
these
you very
issues
much.
to the Connecticut Department
And
of Education.
Thank you so much. We have other speakers signed up. Thank you. Is she on Zoom? All right, we will. Thank you. We didn't skip her. Okay, Michael, if you could unmute Maria, she's got her hand raised. Maria, please remember you've got 3 minutes. Thank you.
Can you see me?
We can hear you. I don't think your camera's on, but we can hear you. Go ahead.
All right, well, I'm here at home with my daughter, who is now in tears because she practiced all day to make a speech and then encountered for the first time in our entire lives to not be allowed entry into a place. We've gone everywhere for a year plus, to stores, amusement parks, everywhere with never wearing a mask until tonight. And now you've made a 7-year-old cry. And I am sure it is not the first time that a 7-year-old is in tears because of your mask policies. Lauren, do you want to try to read this now? She's not even going to read it now. And I don't even know, you guys have everything blocked on the Zoom. Can't put a chat, can't even find the button for the video camera so you can see the tears on her face. These masks, you know it. There is no science behind this. This is completely politics. And you are taking advantage of the children of the
Folks, if you could stop so we could hear her speak, thank you.
You are playing politics with the children of our town. That is not what a board of education is for. You're not supposed to be the arm of the Democrat Party. You're supposed to be putting the interests of our children first. You're supposed to be trying to raise or to teach our children to be critical thinkers. But when you actually have critical thinkers who know how to look at science and even go out of our way to volunteer our time to send you guys science, to collate the evidence for you, to provide it, you, instead of embracing the critical thinking and actually make decisions for yourselves, you guys are blindly following biased policies from biased law firms and biased politicians with their own agenda. Your agenda as the Board of Education should be one thing, and that should be the children of our town and their education. Do you want to say it now?
Folks, you're cutting into her time to speak.
Would you like to try it?
Hello, my name is Lauren Mikolajczyk, and I'm doing homeschooling because my mom and dad didn't want me to wear the useless mask all day. And that was great because I didn't want to wear the mask either. Because at school, my favorite things were hugging my friends and sitting next to them, laughing and making friendship bracelets for each other. But with the mask on, you can't see if they're sad or happy. And you have to stay 6 feet apart. School isn't for
30
kids
seconds.
anymore. It is for robots, or at least that is what it sounds like. And in homeschooling, I learned how to read, and now I can read the side of the mask box that says, these masks do not prevent the spread of viruses. I also learned that my immune system is a lot stronger than a mask. It is great being homeschooled, but I still feel so sad for all my friends who are in school with masks all day and treated like every
Thank you
human.
very
is
much. We
dangerous.
appreciate your comments.
Please stop forcing children and teachers to wear masks.
Okay, thank you. All right, our next speaker is William James. It's for the public record. People are at home trying to listen to you.
Right? Because the point, right, is to think about the classroom scenario for these kids. And we're really asking you, I mean, everybody's passionate, right? Because they're like watching their kids go through this. But to think about what this engagement is like for them and whether or not you're really achieving any kind of measurable goal with having this mask policy. You have right now, it appears to me, you have one dimension metric. You have a one dimension metric, which is virus cases, hospitalizations, deaths. This is a unified metric nationwide. I don't see where you're even measuring these things across just Greenwich, right? And then you're not measuring dimensions within the classroom. What is the impact to students, right? What is the impact to their social well-being? What is the impact to their understanding of course materials, their ability to, as you saw, right, where you guys complained that we're not speaking into the microphone, because it's true, and they can't hear their students, and it's happening to my kids. I can already see it coming in the way they're taking their notes and the homework and stuff, right? So we're asking you to be rational people, to consider these things, and whatever this pressure is from the centralized departments of, I don't even know what state I live in, of the governor or the president or whatever senator wants to be on the TV, is just think for ourselves, for this district, for what makes sense for these kids, right? We know we got like tons of vaccination in this district. We got like all these different other distancing crazy rules. Everybody has to be apart from each other. Like these guys over here are here complaining, but they're like begging you to take down plexi walls. Right? You don't think these guys go hang out in the park 30 minutes later on bikes or jumping around or driving around in cars to each other? They're sharing all their, I mean, they're not sharing spit. I know you guys, right? But like, you know what I'm saying, right? Like they're already, what are you achieving inside the schools with these plexiglass windows? It's just totally irrational. And you have no measurement of all the impact you're doing, you're just ignoring it. Anyway, so I've said enough, thank you so much for the time. It's great to be out here. And it's also great to see so many other people coming out. I didn't know what I would see here tonight. So great to see other people.
All right, thank you. We're going to move on to the non-agenda items. So Simpa Baye. What is your name? You're down towards the bottom of the list. When I call, I'll let you know. Okay, we're in the middle of something. Thank you, Simpa. Thank you. If you continue to be disruptive, I will have to ask you to leave.
Board members, Superintendent, good evening. My name is Simpa Baye, and I appreciate the opportunity to provide comments. I'm a newer resident of Greenwich, and I have children who will almost certainly go through the town's public education system. That said, I have developed serious concerns as I have learned about aspects of the school's curriculum. I am now sadly aware of the disturbing content that seeks to divide innocent young children by race. Many concerned parents refer to this content as critical race theory. At least one board member has publicly denied that critical race theory is taught, but I think that the denial is misinformed at best. I therefore urge the board to address and remove any curriculum content that automatically classifies one race as oppressive and Blacks or designated minorities as victims. Such content is purely political and patently false. I am a French-born immigrant and now a proud US citizen who moved to the United States from my native country of Nigeria 20 years ago with $300 in savings, a good education, and a dream to succeed in one of the only open societies on the face of the planet. I've been treated with kindness and respect by people of all races in Greenwich and around the United States. I've also been offended on occasion by people of all hues who have made bad assumptions about my abilities. That is life. I am Black. I am not a victim. My biracial children are neither victim nor oppressor. Their mother is not an oppressor. My wife and I moved our family to Greenwich in 2020, in part because we wanted a great public education for our children. We want them to be taught how to think and not what to think. We want them to learn the facts and just the facts about the history of their great country. We do not want our children to be burdened by sins that their friends' ancestors may have committed. We don't want them to resent their African or European ancestors for any possible involvement in the slave trade or segregation. We just want them to be equipped to compete in the increasingly global landscape of tomorrow and to love their country. We want them to live in the present. My high school principal was a Native American who had traced her ancestry, believe it or not, to Pocahontas. After a class on the slave trade that she personally taught, she told me something I'll never forget.
30 seconds.
She said, fight your battles. In other words, deal with the issues of your day at the right time. Don't live out imagined ancestral grievances and misdeeds of the past. Fight your battles. That's what my Native American teacher, a kind woman with more than enough to be bitter about, told me. I want this for every child of every ethnicity in this town. Let's keep politics and controversial social theories out of our children's classrooms. Let the children fight their battles. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, folks, we're trying to get through everybody in the hour, so if you could please let us move on. The next speaker is Frances Nobe. I think she's online, Michael. Frances, if you could raise your hand. You can go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, this is Frances Nobe, mom of 3 GPS students returning to school in person for the first time since March 2020. At the June Board of Education meeting, I closed the school year repeating a beautiful poem about grit and perseverance called It Couldn't Be Done by Edgar Allan Guest, originally shared by Ms. Kathleen Ramirez, then assistant principal at North Street School and now assistant principal at North Miana School, Stamford. The poem was in honor of our incredible Greenwich Public School community who survived a pandemic year in person, high flex, and fully remotely. Today, to kick off the school year, I've reflected on the optimistic words of the poem. Just starting to sing as you tackle the thing that cannot be done and you'll do it. And I wondered, is it realistic? Is it reasonable? Is it rational to ask our Greenwich teachers to sing as you tackle the thing as we go into the 3rd school year of the pandemic? Will the words of the poem help to rejuvenate, refresh, revive our teachers, our administrators, our parents, and most importantly, our students? When faced with challenges, do we smile and sing the first time, the second time, or can that strategy start to tire? As we face year 3, I ask the Greenwich community to come together in courage. Instead of words from Edgar Allan Guest, a reporter from Michigan, let's turn to the words from a teacher and best-selling author, Brené Brown. Brené Brown is a professor at the University of Houston who has spent her career studying courage and leadership. Brené Brown says, to get to courage, you have to walk through vulnerability. Vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's our greatest measure of courage. To allow for courage by our students, parents, teachers, staff, we must provide a safe and emotionally supportive environment to be vulnerable. Brené Brown says to have the hard conversation, to show up and be seen, to ask for what you need, to talk about how you're feeling is hard, but ultimately transformative. To close, I'm asking our GPS community to share space, foster kindness, give grace, stay ever curious, or in Brené Brown's words, dare greatly. Yes, the GPS mission is to educate all students to the highest levels of academic achievement and also to enable our students to reach and expand their potential, but also to prepare our students to become productive, responsible, ethical, creative, and compassionate members of society. Good days,
30
bad
seconds.
decisions we agree with, decisions we don't agree with. Greenwich can and will build a caring and courageous community. We love and support our teachers, and we sincerely thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, the next speaker is Graham Fatadad.
Hi, Graham Fatadad, father of 3, an 18-year-old graduated Greenwich High last year, 8-year-old and 6-year-old at North Miana School. First off, we appreciate everything the teachers have done over the years for all of our kids. But we're at this point where I'm looking out, my kids are going to school wearing these masks, scared to death of pulling it down and getting yelled at because they can't drink their water without it in the way. Their teachers and Mrs. Jones or Dr. Jones, pardon me, I emailed you last week. They have teachers that are making them run around in gymnasiums in 90-degree weather with their masks on. It's crazy. So look, what I have to say is nowhere near as eloquent as some of the other speakers we've had up here earlier tonight, but I'll give you some points. There's a recent analysis from the University of Florida. Most masks worn by children in 90-degree Fahrenheit heat were contaminated with parasites, fungi, and bacteria, including a virus known to cause a fatal systemic disease in deer and cattle. How is this okay? A 2004 article in the Canadian Journal of Health on masking in a pediatric hospital expanded on the psychological hazards for children. And I quote, "Imagine the impact of a hospital filled with faceless people on a young child. Who's smiling? How do I recognize my doctor? How does my nurse know who I am? Why is everyone so scared of me and my germs?" The Journal of American Medical Association Pediatrics, JAMA Pediatrics, just produced a study in June this year. They found the carbon dioxide levels for kids wearing masks averaged over 13,000 parts per million of carbon dioxide. The normal content of carbon dioxide is 400 parts per million. OSHA has established a permissible exposure limit for CO2 of 5,000 parts per million. How is this okay that our children are forced to wear masks for 6 to 8 hours a day, while this is 3 times what is acceptable for for workers under OSHA standards across this country? I suspect that this mask mandate
30 seconds.
is driven by the desire of certain adults to feel marginally safer, even though they supposedly have effective vaccines. Masks may or may not be partially effective in shielding adults from COVID, but since when is it ethical for us as adults to burden our children to benefit adults? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next speaker is Michael Joseph Mercanti Anthony.
Hi, good evening. So my name is Mike Mercani Anthony. As some in the room may know, I am a candidate for one of the open seats on the Board of Education this November. I have 23 years of experience in public education as a teacher and administrator, and possess a doctorate in education from the University of Pennsylvania. In my current job, I work for the New York City Department of Education as a director of continuous improvement. That means I support schools in developing and strengthening their systems. I rise tonight out of concern that many of the district systems could be strengthened. The very real lapses in judgment displayed by the curriculum incidents last year suggest that we don't have appropriate systems in place for the development, implementation, and oversight of the curriculum. I urge the board to be careful not to fall into the trap of looking into individual incidents, but instead to re-examine the systems that support a structured, transparent curriculum that appropriately challenges all students. I similarly worry about the systems in place to support students in light of the falling SBAC scores we saw last spring. The special education audit called the district out for shoddy and outdated intervention practices. It suggests we should be concerned about the systems in place for the identification, supervision, and structure of intervention programs. I'm concerned that the superintendent goals approved last month do not point to measurable outcomes as evidence of effective systems. These curriculum issues, I think, are an example of where we as a community would benefit from better communication. We need more than curt denials of what the curriculum is and is not, and more transparent materials which avoid educator jargon. Case in point, social emotional learning is not critical race theory, but a valuable and necessary resource for teaching life skills. The district needs to do a better job at patiently explaining that difference. Similarly, there is no question our students benefit from the inclusion of multiple voices and perspectives in the classroom. All students need books and stories about people that look like them. There is a clear difference between ensuring culturally responsive curricula and Marxist critical race theory. Yet when we dismiss these complaints, when we dismiss these concerns, scoff at them, and otherwise do not engage in a spirit of community dialogue and transparency, we foster an atmosphere of distrust that leads to some of the complaints we're hearing tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. All right, the next speaker is Cara Philbin. Cara Philbin. Cara, sorry.
Hi, I apologize. I like to pre-prepare a speech, but I'm going to wing it tonight. So please note that you are discriminating against Greenwich community members who are choosing to wait for clinical trials to complete in 2023, 2024, 2025 to evaluate the data and for a better understanding of long-term effects. In addition, you are discriminating against people who are afraid of the risks of myocarditis, pericarditis, and VADE, vaccine-associated enhancement disease, which the NIH and CDC continues to change the name for, which is also antibody-dependent enhancement. And people who are aware that this information is missing or not being properly disclosed to COVID vaccine participants. And I quote from the Pfizer regulatory document, I encourage everybody, go to the FDA website, look at the Pfizer co-mRNAdity literature. I have submitted it for public submission, but it says, post-marketing data demonstrates increased risks of myocarditis and pericarditis, particularly within 7 days following the second dose. The observed risk is higher among males under 40 years of age than among females and older males. The observed risk is highest in males 12 through 17 years of age. That is on all of you. You heard that. Read the literature. It also admits that myocarditis, pericarditis, and VADE is not being properly disclosed and is missing information. If you go to the Pfizer sheet insert, it doesn't even acknowledge those risks. You have to go to the regulatory document. You have created a hierarchy, parents at the bottom, students, teachers, administrators. And within this tiered system further divides masked, unmasked, vaccinated and unvaccinated, administrators only masked in public spaces, teachers masked unless 30 alone in the seconds. classroom, students masked unless permitted to have a mask break, bullied despite mask exemptions and threatened for their mask dropping below their nose multiple times, unvaccinated teachers required to provide PCR tests on set dates, and for day 1 through 4, they get docked pay, and on day 5, they get termination notification. You are tearing apart the Greenwich community with these mandates that do not follow the science.
Time.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Laura Costin.
Thank you, members of the board. My name is Laura Costin, and I wear many hats in this town, but I'm here to speak as an individual and a school parent. I see all the patriots here, but you know what's not patriotic? Abusing your access to personal information, like you did to conduct that unauthorized survey. That's wrong. And there are many families who are incensed that their personal information was misused this way. You know what else is not patriotic? Admittedly, taking an admittedly unfortunate event that happened to other people's children and using it to further a political or ideological agenda. The incident that happened with the second grade remote classes is not emblematic of a systematic problem with our curriculum. The video they saw was not a curriculum mainstay. It was a mistake. People like me of a certain age have seen worse. We saw the Space Shuttle Challenger explode before our eyes at school. We watched people die. And I don't remember outrage at that incident. I remember our community coming together. Your signs ask, do you like freedom? You don't want to wear a mask or take a vaccine, you have that freedom. But we are a nation of laws, even if you don't like them. So rest assured, patriots, you have been heard. The cold shoulder you've received over and over isn't your imagination. But like a jilted lover who will not take no for an answer, you think that by repeating the same song on a mixtape, that the scene you keep repeating is somehow less creepy, including moments ago. For a long time, I have said Greenwich should be run like a successful Fortune 500 company with a competent C-suite, one that adheres to best practices and invests for the future and maximizes value. The same with our schools, because we want to stay open. We do not want our teachers sick. We do not want our children sick, even if there's just a small chance that they might die. We want competent managers that adhere to best practices for health and safety. The speakers list here tonight may be dominated by patriots, but
30
it's a small
seconds.
list. And the rest of our 9,000 students and staff, thank you for your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Please be respectful, folks. You want respect, you gotta give it to. Next speaker is Carl Higby.
All right, so, well, I got some signs here. Most of you guys talked to most of you, and I first got engaged in this. I have a couple kids in the school district right now. I first got engaged in this when my second grade daughter's class was showed an erection. So that kind of wicked me off. So now I'm engaged. Tony Jones knows me very personally. She shunned me and decided that she was going to push me off to the side. I put it on the front page of the New York Post. Do not doubt my resolve here. All right. I want to know, Tony, right now, these teachers, these are science teachers right here. Okay, science, because that's what we're doing here. Science. What's their consequence for not wearing a mask in school?
This is not a give and take. You get 3
Okay,
minutes
so
left.
all right, if it's not a give and take, let me tell you something. You guys work for us. You work for us. I'm friends with some of you guys. I don't care for some of you guys. But here's what the ultimatum is. Enforce the standard. Maybe fire her. I don't know. But if you don't do something, if there's no repercussions on those teachers, my kids aren't going to wear a mask to school. You know why? Because there is no standard. Now you want to get to the science of this. You have about, I think it was 404 children died tragically in the pandemic, they're calling it, total, about 200 a year. Okay. Died with COVID, not of COVID, with COVID. All but one had comorbidities that greatly contributed to their death. Tragically, no child should die. Nobody here wants any child to die. 18-19 flu season, you had 480 kids die of flu, not with flu. You had 52,000 kids in the same year hospitalized for the flu. You know how many been hospitalized for COVID? 3,800. Our children are not susceptible to this the way we are as adults. You want to get vaccinated? Great. I'll give you a ride to the hospital to do it. You want to wear a mask? Super. But you should not be telling our kids that they have to do things. Graham over here said that it's 3 times the carbon dioxide. Do we care about kids? Are we doing science? I'm serious. It's like you guys fly by the seat of your pants, and we are fed up. We're not going to put up with it anymore. I want to make it clear. We're not going to sit here and just let you poo-poo us. Listen, I don't know what you're even doing. You've been typing this whole time. Okay, I don't, you're sitting up here typing. Secretary, if you're not part of the board, maybe sit over there, but it looks pretty disrespectful because I have no idea who you are. Okay.
And 30 seconds.
So I want you guys to know that we're not going away. We're not. I'm looking right at you, Tony Jones, because I want these teachers to have consequences. And if you don't, we're going to be back here every day. We're going to put this on the front page every day. Because if there's going to be a standard, apply it across the board, or my kids, they're not wearing a damn mask.
Okay, thank you. The next speaker is Eilert Steinberg. Eilert Steinberg. I think online, Michael.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Ayala Steinberg. This is our second year at North Miamis. My son is currently in first grade. We could not be happier with the teachers and support staff who have helped him grow socially and academically over the past year. He actually had COVID, caught it while wearing a mask at school last year. 2 of my children had to quarantine for 2 weeks. My other 2 children had to quarantine for 2 weeks. Nobody else got it, but they did lose an additional 2 weeks of school. COVID may make children sick, but there has only been 1 confirmed death in Connecticut in children ages 0 to 9. Last year, no one was sure how quickly the virus would spread within the school building. Desks were moved apart, masks were purchased, and cleaning was done more frequently. We have a lot more information now. Natural immunity is better than vaccines. With better ventilation and more thorough cleaning, kids don't spread as many germs. The vaccine can also cause heart inflammation in young men. Vaccinated people can still spread and get very sick from COVID. Masks can cause an assortment of physical and mental difficulties. Masking an age group that is not spreading the disease is not supported by any studies that have been done on masking. Greenwich should be allowing mask choice. And while many are eager for their children to get vaccinated, there are also those of us that are more concerned about the potential side effects of the vaccine than actually getting COVID, and will not be giving our children COVID vaccines. The COVID vaccine should not be made mandatory for children. Children are not at risk of serious illness from COVID, and they aren't the ones spreading COVID. Certainly, no one wants their children to get sick, and no one wants their child to get someone else sick. But the prevention cannot be worse than the sickness itself. We can all do better by our kids. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, the next speaker is Kristen Naminsky. Kristen?
So I submitted this to the board. It's 6 pages. I'm just going to try to read through as much as I can in 3 minutes. I'm a parent of 2 children in the Greenwich Public Schools. I'm writing to express my grave concerns regarding the compulsory use of face masks in Greenwich Public Schools. It has come to my attention that there are widely known hazards, health risks, and dangers associated with the use of face masks, which can result in both physical and psychological harm to the user. It is reasonable to expect that you have considered such issues carefully and familiarize yourself with the available evidence prior to making a decision to compel pupils in your care to wear masks. However, insofar as you may not have done so to date, I wish to draw these issues to your attention, and I call upon you to take immediate remedial action. Please be advised that I am also of the view that compelling children to wear a face mask is a direct violation of their right to bodily integrity and/or physical autonomy, and thus constitutes an abuse. For the avoidance of any doubt, I object to my children being subjected to such abuse and call for an end to the same forthwith. For decades, the accepted best practice in regards to medical masks has been to wear them only in a medical setting. There are mountains of peer-reviewed studies demonstrating the ineffectiveness of masks in preventing the spread of virus. These studies all demonstrate that there is little to no benefit to widespread universal mask usage. Some of the studies actually suggest that there's a potential for harm from overuse of masks. These studies are further supported by the manufacturer's own warning on surgical mask packaging that states, this product is not a respirator and will not provide any protection against COVID-19, coronavirus, or other viruses or contaminants. Wearing an ear loop mask does not reduce the risk of contracting any disease or infection. Perhaps manufacturers are only attempting to limit any potential liability. Consider, in a correspondence with a colleague in February 5th, 2020, Dr. Anthony Fauci himself stated, masks are really for infected people to prevent them from spreading infection to people who are not infected, rather than protecting uninfected people from acquiring infection. The typical mask you buy in the drugstore is not really effective in keeping out virus, which is small enough to pass through the material. Sometime between March and April of 2020, the guidance on masking changed. There's no study or even data to support this change. The change in guidance was justified solely on a rare anecdote. On May 27, 2020, Dr. Fauci told CNN that he supported masking because he wanted, quote, to make it a symbol for people
30
to see
seconds.
that that's the kind of thing you should be doing. When considering CDC guidance, it's important to consider that the CDC is somewhat protected from any liabilities concerning their advice because they have no liability to enforce adherence. When schools or businesses adopt the CDC's guidance and decide to enforce that guidance, they are assuming responsibilities for the outcome of those actions. GPS is currently mandating mask usage by all students, faculty, and visitors. The justification of this policy is to reduce the number of new cases of COVID. However, mask manufacturers clearly
Time.
state that their
Thank you very
products are
much.
not intended for this purpose.
Thank you. All right, the next speaker is Carlissa Bijot. Carlissa? I don't know if we have her. Carlisa. Michael, if you see her online.
I'm not seeing her online.
Biggot. We'll just do one more check. Not in the room. All right, we'll move on. Caitlin Hayes.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the Board of Directors in this great town of Greenwich, Connecticut. I have already submitted my public comment, so I don't want to waste any more time on what I'd already sent you, which was in effect a legal demand letter demanding the removal of the masks from usage for the children. Instead, I want to talk a little bit about campaign contributions and pharmaceutical lobbying. And I would like to make an open inquiry into every single board member is that if they have received any contribution from any lobbying in pharmaceutical or any specific lobbying that has now resulted in this mandate. I am aware of Lamont's order. I am aware that there is an understanding of attempts to comply with that order of Lamont, but I would like to express my inherent desire to see an end to this mask mandate because there are psychological, behavioral effects that these children are experiencing. And at the end, someone is gonna be culpable for it. That's all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, next speaker is James Waters. Michael, I think he's online. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Chairman Bernstein, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Great. Good evening, Board of Education members and Dr. Jones. My name is James Waters and I'm a parent at North Miami School. Tonight, I want to provide a little context for all of you and those tuning in. You're here tonight to conduct the work you were elected and hired to do in running and working to improve our fantastic school system. We, the vast silent majority of parents and town residents, Republicans, Democrats, and unaffiliated voters alike, support what you're doing and applaud you for making the hard decisions. We encourage you to keep your eye on the ball and not let the noise distract you. There's plenty to be done, and our school system has plenty to improve upon to make it as excellent as it could be. For the record, I don't think any kid likes wearing a mask. Who does? But my kids have been back at school with their friends since September 2020. They've worn a mask just like all their friends, and they couldn't care less. They'd rather deal with a minor inconvenience for a little longer and get a little stick in their arm in a month or two. Meanwhile, as we've heard tonight, there's plenty of noise. There always will be. There will continue to be noise in the coming months as we go through our municipal election as we attempt to put COVID behind us. And there will continue to be noise in the weeks and months and years beyond that. There are plenty of axes to grind in our town, and axes tend to be squeaky wheels. Yet keep this in mind. Tonight, most of this noise on masks and vaccines and critical race theory is coming from usual suspects. Suspects we've come to know, the same small group that marks this meeting on its calendar drives a cheap sign truck around town, and tries to push a selfish fringe agenda that relies on misinformation from cherry-picked sources and fake science. I strongly support their right to speak and even to whine, but please don't let it distract you from things that really matter, from things that are working, from things that you need to do. Focus instead on academic excellence and ways to bolster personalized learning. Focus on getting our crumbling school buildings rebuilt, like the one you're sitting in right now. Focus on keeping our kids safe and healthy in school. These are the things that matter. The noise does not. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Please, you're being very disrespectful. Honestly, folks, stop. If you continue, we're going to clear the room and you can watch the rest of the meeting on Zoom. The public comments are over. We're going to move on in our agenda. Thank you very much. We've got a meeting to conduct. Next up is our monthly reports, starting with it. If you continue, we will clear the room, folks. Okay, thank you. That you might want to write to the governor. It's his mask mandate. We're going to move on with our meeting. Thank you. Next up is the monthly report, starting with the superintendent. If you don't stop, we will clear the room. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you. First of all, I just want to say thank you to the Greenwich Alliance, who really helped us get a good start off to the year. And I know Lil Perone mentioned the t-shirts that they provided. We're sharing them and in celebrating 15 years of partnership with the Alliance, and they do so much for our school system. Also, just I know that a lot of North Miami parents do watch the meetings, and just an update that construction is still on time. It's looking really good. We've been able to get all of the materials. So we're very, very optimistic about that project. Also, the Big Ideas Parent Night was very, very well attended. I don't know if any of the board were able to watch any of that for your own children, but on the very first evening, we had over 200 people join that call. They were videoed if you'd like to go back and watch them, and that's the new math rollout. That is K-8. And then I want to mention just with Cardinal Stadium, we've kept the board updated on that. We do have a facilities newsletter that will be coming out that'll have a lot more information. We are trying to do, and I guess it would be similar to what they do in a restaurant with a soft opening. We are really trying to see if we are going to be able to use the field on October 2nd, but I want to cautiously say that because we have a lot of work and sign-offs that have to happen. And that would be, and I don't know, Mr. Kelly, if you want to join me or share, but yep.
Well, you want to go committee report? Okay, we'll do it then.
Okay, so we're going to move on to committee report. Oh, Mr. Scher, sorry.
Hi, Tony. I have a couple questions. And I appreciate your update. I wanted to ask about two things we're doing. And one of them I hadn't thought about to ask about, but it relates to an item tonight until I just heard two things that really stimulated me. I thought this was handled, but maybe it wasn't. One's about vaccinations, but the other one was more about how we're handling COVID-19 in schools. I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, we're following to the letter in the implementation of COVID practices, the guidance of the CDC and the Connecticut State Department of Health, which I've done my homework and read them both, and they're completely aligned. Is that correct? Is there anything different we're doing that's not in that guidance?
We are not doing anything different really than we did last year. And that guidance not only comes from the guidance document from the state, but from the epidemiologist at the state level who we consulted last year. If we are, and I think what you're really asking is that in the newest guidance this fall, they do allow a teacher to take a mask off when they're teaching. However, GEA and GPS together have not advised our teachers to do that because we feel like it's not a great role model. Just as we did last year, and again, under the guidance of the epidemiologist, if they are in an office space working with their colleagues, and they have distance, then they may actually take their mask off. If they're in a professional development, just as if our kids are at lunch and they're in the gyms eating, they have their mask off. So yes, we are following exactly what we're supposed to be doing, and that guidance went to the staff last year and also again this year.
Okay, so let me ask, that was not the one I was going to ask about, but that's interesting. So what you're saying is that for teachers, we're deviating from the CDC and the State Department of Health guidance. That's what I just heard you say. Okay.
No, they're not deviating. They're going by the guidance that we utilize at the local level, which is our local health department, includes the state Connecticut Department of Health, epidemiologist, also CDC. And in fact, if we had used CDC last year, I'm sure you remember, we wouldn't have been open. CDC was wanting 6 feet of distance last year. And we utilized the Pediatric Association and went with 3, made all the difference in opening our doors.
Tony, I don't want to debate a policy of 12 months ago. That wasn't my question. My question is a simple question, which is what guidance, because the board never voted on a quarantine or any of that kind of policy. So I just wanted to know what guidance, because you'd said to us numerous times, and I said, okay, fine, I'm just gonna, at the time, you said, we are following the guidance of the CDC and the Connecticut Department of Health. That's what you told me in July of 2020. I'm like, okay, sounds good to me. You know, that was what you were following. I don't want to debate whether it was a good idea or not a good idea. I'm certainly not qualified to have that debate. I'm not a public health person, and I know you aren't either. So that was fine. That's what you're doing. I'm trying to understand today if we're still following that guidance or you've got your own Greenwich version. And that's all I'm trying to ask. And then I have a specific question about what's actually happening in the classroom. So are we following that guidance or we're doing something different? It sounds like we're doing something different.
As you'll remember, I did send the board, and the board knows that they were updated in 2021, so we would not be following the 2020 guidance.
Okay.
That's where the classroom guidance is a little bit different. Other than that, nothing else has changed.
Okay, so hold on. This is our board meeting. No offense to anybody who wants to chime in, but this is our board meeting. So, Tony, my question was on quarantining of students, because the State Department of Health's guidance changed and the CDC's guidance changed, and it applies to the practices of students in the classroom. They redefined what close contact is, and they give very specific guidance about quarantining in their new definition of close contact. So my question is just a simple one. Are we following that, or are we doing something different?
Yes, our town has chosen to follow the CDC guidance for quarantine. Some towns are following a 7-day, still staying with the 14-day. But yes, we are following that guidance.
Okay, so
And that's on the guidance of our local health department. They decide that for us.
that's okay. So what it says is that, and maybe this is just a question, do we have any, are we doing small group activities in a classroom where kids are closer together than 3 feet?
If you've ever been in a classroom with children,
I have been.
it's almost impossible to keep them 3 feet all day long, every minute of the day.
Yeah.
We absolutely are doing what we did last year and trying to be as responsible as possible to keep our children safe and teachers.
Okay, let me just move on. My other question was, and these are 2 questions that just popped up. Vaccinations. We have a vaccination policy before us tonight that was revised, and we're going to get to that. But when we last talked about this, they talked about testing. I was very surprised to hear from an employee that they're being charged for that testing. I presume we're providing this testing if someone needs to have testing under this mandate, or it's covered by the insurance that they're provided by the town of Greenwich. Is that person misinformed, or are we telling, or people have to get a test that they have to pay for every week?
Initially, when it came out from the Connecticut Department of Health, individuals were going to have to pay, and they were concerned at the state level that it was going to cost because it was every week.
Okay.
However, on Monday, they had an emergency meeting issued new guidance, and we've been letting our staff know that if they go to a state approved testing site, there is no cost to the employee.
Okay. And then the second thing I want, thank you for that clarification. That's great. The second thing, and I saw your note about the listing the sites, so that was helpful. That got sent out. The other thing I wasn't sure what that gentleman said is, I know that you've been sending out notes to parents and so on and so forth about vaccination clinics and testing that can be done on school sites at certain times, so on and so forth. I don't want to wade into that debate. But do you know if these clinics that are being housed at our sites, do they require parental consent for a minor to get tested or get a vaccine? Do you know?
Absolutely, yes.
Excuse me, please
Hold-
don't
hold-
disrupt the
hold on,
meeting. It's a
hold on,
board
thank-
meeting, not a meeting for.
With
for
all
discussion.
due respect, this is our meeting. Hold on just one second. So we're certain that these clinics would not issue a test or a vaccination to a minor without a signed consent.
So the testing that you're referencing is a brand new program from the Connecticut Department of Health.
Correct.
And the parents have to sign the form. They opt into to be part of the pool testing where they do like 20 children at a time. If somebody tests positive, then they go back and look at the separate samples. But again, the parents opt in if they want to choose that for their child. You know, if they have a grandparent at home and they're worried about the child bringing an infection home, they may choose to do the pool testing on a weekly basis. We have no idea how many families will want to take advantage, but it's, you know, it's up to them. If they want to, they sign up and they can unenroll at any point in time as well.
And the same is true for the vaccine clinic. Not one of our students can't walk into this clinic if they're a minor and get a vaccine. Is that correct?
Unless they were, if they were a senior, and I would have to clarify with Mary Keller, and they're already 18 and.
Yeah, if you're over 18, sure.
Yes.
If you're a minor.
But no, they have to have parent consent.
Okay.
Ms.
Thank you for the
Kowalski.
clarification.
So I have a question regarding what you had said about teachers. If they were on campus and they are socially distanced and they're in a room and they're 6 feet apart, they're not wearing masks. Is that's what, or they've taken them off? Is that what you said?
If they are sitting like in a professional development, they're in their offices, things of that nature, they can also have a mask break, just like our kids do during the day. When we have snack in the elementary classroom, every other row, they take their mask off and have a snack break. So the teachers, yes, if they are in their office space, or if they're in a training room with 5 teachers and they're spaced out doing their training, they may take it off. Yes.
But okay, so they're in a room and they're spaced out and they're on school grounds, correct?
Yes.
So I'm looking at the policy that was just passed, and that the only exception for
Okay,
teachers.
Ms. Holman, if you continue to disrupt the meeting, you will be asked to leave. Thank you. Oh, okay, thank you. I think it's time for you to go. You can feel free to join the meeting via Zoom. Thank you. Feel free to join the meeting via Zoom. Thank you very much.
So that type of exception that you're talking about is not included in the policy. In fact, it says the only exception for teachers is when they're in a when they are actually physically teaching and 6 feet apart.
I think that's one of the reasons the policy is changing a little bit tonight, because it's even changed since 2020 and 2021.
Well,
But
wait,
that is the guidance. When you look at policy, normally we would have a reg that goes with policy. What I do is send out the guidance document to the staff that is how to implement it. Yes, they are allowed to have mask breaks just like our children. Absolutely. And if they're in a planning session and they're spaced out, yes, they may take them off.
That's not what our policy says.
That is how we are implementing the policy.
But that's not what the policy says. That's a
Well,
policy
isn't it on the
violation.
agenda tonight or not?
All right, thank you, Carl. Carl, come on, seriously. Trying to run a meeting. We can't have a discussion with that. All right,
I mean,
so Karen, if we want, we can make a referral to the Policy Governance Committee to take that up, I think.
And I did.
Okay, Carl, that's enough. Thank you.
And I actually emailed Dr. Jones earlier this week because in light of that, to say, what is the ask here? Because I knew then and there that was not within our policy. In fact, that is a policy violation. So if you need to make an amendment to the policy, then we need to take that up because that's not allowed under the policy that was passed in August.
I will certainly go back and reference the policy. What I can say, this hasn't changed since last year and how we are implementing for our staff and for our students. So yeah, I'll certainly go back and look at that.
Yeah, because we do provide for mask breaks for students. It describes on when they're allowed for mask breaks. And even when, despite the fact of what happened last year, the policy was passed in August. So it's irrelevant. It's what happens after this policy was passed. This policy was passed in the August meeting of this year.
All right, we can certainly have the Policy Governance Committee take that up with the superintendent. Mr. Scher.
Mr. Bernstein, look, this board is the governing authority for the school system. Our policies have the effect of law inside the school system. No offense, I don't want to have a debate about this. The superintendent does not have the discretion when she implements our policies to modify our policies based upon what she sees fit. Okay, that's not a subject that gets referred to a committee. The board needs to just, and you as the chairman representing the board, speaking for the board, just need to make that careful. If somebody wants to come back and modify the policy through 2 reads before this board to add mask breaks and kids mask breaks and all the rest of it, that's fine. But we cannot have the administration, after this board passes a policy, deciding what part of it they're going to do and not do every day.
All right, Mr. Scher, if you read the mask policy, there's actually mask breaks already there. And what applies to students should also apply to staff. The referral to policy governance is if there needs to be a change, that's the proper place for it to start. We will follow with our governance, and please stop interrupting us. This is a meeting of the board. It is not a meeting with the public. Thank you very much. It is a meeting of the board. Okay, we are going to move on. So we're on to reports of, okay, please leave. I'm asking you to go. You're being disruptive and I'm going to have you escorted out. Okay, if you don't leave, we will clear the room. We need to be able to conduct our meeting. We need people to be respectful of that. It's a public meeting. You can watch the meeting. It's not participatory, ma'am. It's time to go. It's time to go. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to reports of officers, committees, and liaisons. Mr. Kelly, did you want to take up the stadium?
Yes, Peter, thank you very much. Or Chairman Bernstein, I should say, sorry. We're talking about the opportunity to open up Cardinal Stadium in a modified fashion. We have reserved Boyle Stadium, which we played at the last home game was played there. Everything went fine, but it is not Cardinal Stadium. We have an opportunity, might have an opportunity. We have a couple of small hurdles to get past to have a reduced version of what the stadium will look like to open it up. We'll have just the bleachers, which are 100% complete. We will have all the rest of the construction site will be fenced off with construction fence. Everything will be, of course, before we take this step, we'll make sure everything is safe. But the issues on the negative are that we might have to control the attendance. It might have to be students and parents only. It might not have to be. We're talking about that right now. Boyle Stadium, on the other hand, which we have to consider as well, will not be restricted attendance, but it also is not Cardinal Stadium. I've spoke to the football coach. Of course, he wants to play at Cardinal Stadium. As a coach for many years myself, there is superpowers that one receives when one is coaching and playing at Cardinal Stadium when you are a Greenwich High School student and a Greenwich coach. So those superpowers we will take away from the kids by not having our game at Cardinal Stadium. So the issue here is, do we use Boyle Stadium, which was adequate to Stanford Stadium, or do we take, if we do have that opportunity to open up the stadium in its incomplete form, and there will be construction fences up and there will be no bathrooms. We'll have a porta potties like we've had before. All that stuff will be ready by the end of the month for the next home game. But do we want to open it up prior to being complete? That is the question.
Ms. Stowe.
First of all, I think that it's wonderful that we even have this choice now, Joe, and thank you for all the work you've been doing on this. I had the pleasure of going to Boyle Stadium last weekend, and it was lovely. They did a really nice job, and although they ran out of water, but I would say that if we could play in our stadium, I know there's something that's so special about that. And to me, it's like moving into the house and all the furniture isn't there, but it's coming. And the fact that the kids, when there's only so many games in a football season, I went to Notre Dame, so I particularly like football. And I think that if you can have a home game and these seniors could be there with their parents, I know it's a little bit of a harder decision, I think, if the community can't be there, but to me, then it's a no-brainer. But if it's even just the kids and the parents, I think we should leave it up to the coach and Gus and, and the kids, really. If that's what they want, I think that makes sense.
Ms. Hirsch?
I would love nothing more than to see our students playing in our stadium and having them cheered on by our community. And I love the idea that we can try to open it up even if it's not fully finished. The only question I actually have is you discussed maybe needing to control the attendance, but our other bleachers, the visitors side is still open and available, correct? So if we needed to limit the number of individuals sitting in the bleachers, the home bleachers, would the rest of our visitors be able to sit on the other side if need be?
Well, yes, the visitor side will be completely open as it has been since the construction started. That holds, I think it's about 1,000 people or so. So we still have a good amount, but we also do have the visiting teams fans that will be over there as well. So the stadium holds, I think, about 3,800 people. So we do have a good number of people in the home bleachers. I only put that as a possibility that we have to restrict attendance. But to Ms. Stowe's point, I think if asked, the students, the football players, if they would prefer to play at Cardinal Stadium rather than Boyle Stadium, regardless of the attendance, I think to a player, they would say would much rather play at Cardinal Stadium. Are there any players here that agree with that? Yes, I see that. Yep, unanimous for the room players. So any further questions?
And
Mr.
just
Chair.
as long as,
Okay.
sorry. The only other question is we would be able to make sure that those who needed accommodations to be able to access the stadium would have, the same kind of golf cart that we've had in the past, be able to access.
We've met with the ADA people, and the ADA people, since we're not 100% complete with ADA compliance as far as the elevator goes, access to the bleachers is 100% ADA compliant. The parking lot, the handicap ADA parking lot will not be ready, but we are going to supply golf carts like we used to do from the regular parking, and the elevator will be in short order. Be ready to go for the next home game, but we will not have use of the elevator, and our ADA people have signed off on us not having that.
Mr. Chair.
Who's that AD? Who's the ADA people?
Alan and Stephanie, the first selectmen's, what's the full name is very confusing.
Advisory Committee. on
Good.
Advisory Committee, you know that.
My other, thank you for asking that. Thank you for asking, Karen. My second question, or the second question I wanted an answer to was, what is the new date that this project's going to be complete?
We feel pretty comfortable that it will be complete for the next home game, which will be on the 30th of October.
So the whole, the parking lot will be finished, the driveway, the electricity, all that stuff by the 30th of October?
That is correct.
Okay, thanks.
All right, anything else from that? Any other reports from committees, officers, liaisons? Ms. Stowe?
Just real fast, Budget Committee, it is the beginning of budget season. I know it's hard to believe, but if I could ask my committee members, I'm trying to find a date with the administration for next week, so we will get started on that.
All right, any other reports? Ms. Oh, sorry, Dr. Francis, your hand.
Sorry, yep. Just from the Alliance, we had our first meeting earlier this week. It's always very exciting. And it is, as was mentioned earlier, an organization that has done so much for the schools. It's really great. Just a quick update, Reaching Out grants awarded $108,000, which brings the grants up to $1.7 million to the schools. This year, it includes Greenwich High School, Eastern Middle School, Western, Ham Ave, and New Leb. In terms of the other big thing going on is Avid Success. one of the new large initiatives. It's providing extensions to the different AVID programs. And one of the big things they're looking for are mentors as part of their mentoring program. So you can email Julie at greenwichalliance.org to learn more about that if you would like to help in terms of mentoring students. And this is particularly for students as they leave to go off to college. Tuning into music is continuing with virtual lessons at this time. And everybody should be getting ready for Turkey Trot, which is coming up, and registration will be opening soon. Thank you much.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Hirsch.
I just wanted to report on SEAC, our Special Education Advisory Committee. They had their first meeting of the year and realigned some of their members of their voting members of their board due to changes in enrollment. And they will be sending out some information to look for additional members for committees and other things. They were also discussing some of their plans for the upcoming year and were discussing topics to go forward to for their committees for the audit as well. So I just wanted to report on that, but they will be reaching out to invite others to submit applications to be participatory on that committee.
Thank you. All right, seeing no other reports, we're going to move on to our discussion items. So the first is the summer school executive summary. So Dr. Carabillo, take it away.
So good evening, Chairman Bernstein, BOE members, Dr. Jones, parents, and colleagues. First slide, I'm going to give you a brief summary of our 2021 summer school program. The dates for the summer school program were July 5th to August 6th. The focus of the program was to reinforce skills, accelerate learning, and for students to gain credits towards graduation. If you recall, last summer, all of our summer school programs were held virtually with synchronous learning and teaching. We did offer our ESY students who required related services to receive them in person throughout the day at Cos Cob Elementary School. This year, we were able to have in-person summer school programs, with the exception of some secondary classes which were held virtually, and they were also synchronous. Our pre-K-5, next slide, please. Our pre-K-5 program was held at Glenville Elementary School, and our secondary program, 6 through 12, was held at Central Middle School. We also had 2 satellite sites, one at Julian Curtis and the other at Western Middle School. The principals of those 2 sites invited their teachers and students to participate in summer learning at their home schools. For the past 4 years, we have invited K-8 students to attend our summer learning program who have not been reaching their expected growth on our universal screener, STAR. We take the scores from our winter score assessment that occurs in January. We invite those students who are scoring at a level 1 or a level 2. Some building teams also recommend students they believe need additional reinforcement to ready them for the next school year. We invite all students who have been identified to receive extended year services, ESY. We are required by law to offer an ESY program that is similar to what the identified students participate during the regular school year. This year, we invited over 900 K-8 students and 443 ESY students. High school students register for courses they are interested in taking for acceleration, improving their grades, gaining credit, or credit recovery. That's the correct slide now, elementary. As you see from this slide, the students' day included literacy instruction and numeracy instruction. Students were able to practice a variety of speaking and listening skills, critical thinking skills, reading, problem solving, and mathematical skills. The Glenville program had 5 pre-K classes, 3 kindergarten classes, 2 first grade classes, 3 classes of grade 2, 3 classes of grade 3, 2 classes of grade 4, and 2 classes of grade 5. The average class size was 12 students. Next slide. The Julian Curtis Satellite Day program was a little different as the students had a longer day and a physical education class. They had 5 classes, K through 4, with 10 students in each class. And both the elementary and the satellite programs and the secondary K-8 program had from 11:30 to 1 o'clock, they received, ESY students received related services and specialized instruction. Next slide. The secondary 6 through 12 day varied depending on the classes that students took, either for reinforcement, for reading and math, and they were each 1.5 hours long with an average class size of 13, or the length required for the courses that students were taking for acceleration or credit attainment. The middle school acceleration classes were 2 to 3 hours long, again, depending on the course that they were taking. The high school courses were anywhere from 2 to 4 hours in length, depending on the requirements to cover the content for credit attainment. The courses that were listed are offered on the next 2 slides. Next slide. So you can see that these are the courses that secondary students took for credit, and you can see the number of students that earned credits and that there's still a few incompletes. Students are taking their exams at the end and they have not been corrected yet. So we're just waiting for a few more scores. Next slide for more secondary outcomes. And you can see some additional courses, the number of students in each one of those classes, how many credits they earned or accelerated with, and then the number of incompletes. The next slide for the satellite program at Western Middle School. The focus at the satellite Western Middle School was focused on English and math instruction. They met from 8:30 to 11, and the ESY students, again, received services from 11:30 to 1. Western also invited some rising 5th graders to attend their programming so they would have a positive experience for transitioning to Western Middle School next year. Next slide. Our summer programs were in session for 5 weeks. The focus for pre-K-8 was moving students forward with their academic skills and social emotional growth. They had morning meetings, breakfast and lunch, gave students opportunities to practice their social skills. The secondary program focused on credit attainment to ensure that students had credits to matriculate through high school and graduate with their peers on time. Students who are in the ESY program, the focus was on their individual IEP goals and to continue making progress during the summer. Next slide. This slide shows the number of students that were enrolled in each program. You can see the elementaries had 193 students at Glenville. Julian Curtis had 15 students. Western Middle School had 13 grade 5 students. At the middle school, we had 73 students, and that was a combination of both our K-8 students and some of our secondary acceleration courses for middle school students, 37 at Western Middle School. The high school had 145 students and pre-K had 57 students. Next slide. These are the students, the percentage of students that had high needs. Either they were identified as special education students and perhaps ESY students, English language learners, and free and reduced lunch. And you can see the number of students in each program. Next slide shows you the attendance. This year, students attended for 19 days. That was the length of the program. And students that attended over 20 days, if you look at the attendance, you'll see that many students did attend at least 20 days. So that was very exciting to see. Next slide. Now I'm going to leave you, go back one slide, please. So the attendance was really important because this year it was shorter than we had last year or the previous year. So it'll be interesting to see what the end outcomes are. So this was the second year our summer school program was impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. We were fortunate to have most students in school for our summer learning. Our classes were small to ensure we could continue to implement and mitigating strategies to keep students and teachers safe. Only those high school students taking English, social studies, and PE classes received synchronous instruction. This occurred so we could keep social distancing for our secondary students at Central Middle School. There were fewer students in our summer program this year, and we believe it was due to the pandemic, and the students, as well as the parents and many teachers, needed a break from the challenging year they had just finished. Students who attended 80% of the time, more than 17 days of class, generally performed at higher levels. The teachers at the 4 sites also focused on developing relationships with the students in front of them. I was at Glenville many days during dismissal, and the children exiting the building were smiling, happy, and really were happy to be in school, but they were also happy to go home. We are looking forward to reviewing all of the data from our coming benchmarks to determine new and creative ways to deliver summer learning opportunities for our students' growth in both areas of academics and social emotional growth. Any questions?
Absolutely. And it's Peter Bernstein. I guess I'll kick off. So I do want to ask about performances. I know you talked about outcomes and you basically looked at, whether or not they were able to get credit. I guess I want to dig a little deeper, especially for the elementary school students that were invited, into whether we saw learning, the recovery of that learning loss or acceleration for some of them. So if you can maybe talk a little bit more about the performance of the students, and in particular, you had the 2 alternate sites at JC and Western, if you could talk about whether it was successful having that versus kids that were in the other sites.
What we saw from the data that we had for the STAR assessment, because that's what we gave them at the end of the 5 weeks, we saw that the students that were in the satellite group, they tended to have a little bit higher performance on their scale score on STAR. The students at Glenville and at the middle schools, the majority of the students stayed either level with their performance so that they did not lose any learning at all that they had, or they improved slightly. The 5 weeks was a short period of time, and we're not sure whether we will see that carry through when students take their benchmarks. In the beginning of the year, they just finished taking STAR, and they're in the process of taking our benchmarks. So we're going to look at that information as well to see if our students have encouraged and really made solid the learning that they did this summer so that they can really progress this year.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Chair, I think I saw your hand.
I got a couple of housekeeping questions, and
Okay.
Because a couple things that couldn't crosswalk, so I need your help. And I'll get to that one. The first one was, what did we spend on this program this year? I know you've revamped it and changed it, and we used to spend a couple $1,000,000 on this thing, or $1.5 million. And I know you came last year and said we spend less. I was wondering in 2021, what did we wind up spending?
Okay, I can tell you from 2019, 2020, which was the
Yep.
last year that we had
Yep.
a regular summer school program. It
Yep.
was regular.
No, you gave us that number. I was wondering about 2021.
So
Do you know?
2021 for the non-ESY program, we spent $72,830.
And what did you spend for the ESY program?
For the ESY program for 2021, we spent $478,636. And the large decrease, we believe, was due to busing, as well as there was no direct instruction. There was some direct instruction of ESY students, but the majority of the ESY students just had their related services at Koskov School.
Okay.
This year, do you want to know what this year was? I have some information.
Isn't this 21?
This is year 21. This year our revenues for summer school general was 58,000.
Yeah, no, that part I saw. I was more interested in the expense side. I know the revenues you presented at the last
So the expense for ESY this year was $732,231, but
Mhm.
we're still waiting for our final ESY transportation bill.
Okay, and what was the other non-ESY part? Do you know?
Non-ESY part, I don't have all of the cost yet, but
Okay.
Pat Marin is working on that for me.
Is it roughly the same as the year before?
I believe it is.
Okay, so if you could just follow up with that. The other one was your slide, I'm sorry, your slides aren't on the screen anymore. The JC program,
Yep.
just remind me who was eligible to attend at the JC program?
All of the students that had been identified as level 1 or level 2 students on the Winter Star score. They were all invited.
But just JC students, or was that open to everybody else? Was it just another site?
JC students at JC were just JC students.
Okay.
Over 900 students were invited. The students that went to JC happened to be JC students.
Right. And the Western Middle School program, right?
Yep.
Was that just Western kids?
That was just Western students as well.
Okay. I'm gonna want to ask Sean or Ann, I'll just tell you, but it's really a question for Sean. Breaking out the costs to run these programs based upon how you presented it, kind of site by site, so on and so forth, but that'll be a follow-up question. My other question was, I think I heard you just explain to Mr. Bernstein that what you're saying is you don't yet know the impact of the program because you're just putting in the universal screener right now, correct?
Correct.
And then you're going to do a compare against students who were invited and didn't attend?
Correct.
When would we see that? When would we expect to see that data from you?
I will have to work with Jen Lau and I can get back to you with when we think we can get that for you.
I'm sorry, I wasn't asking my question properly. At what future meeting would we expect to see an update? A month from now, 2 months from now?
I'll work with the superintendent and with Jen Lau and we will let you know what the date would be.
Okay. The other thing, I was a little confused about the course list in your presentation.
Yep.
And I appreciate you providing the catalog that's prevent. But we're about to take up an item that's about fees. And there are a bunch of courses listed here that are not in the fee list. So I couldn't figure that one out. Like health and wellness is in the catalog, but it's not listed in the list of courses with fees. I realize you're not responsible. Well, maybe you are, I don't know. Software research project, bridge to test only. And I just didn't know, do they have other names?
I know that there has been a fee for the test only for bridge.
What is that?
It's the test for middle school students and to take, instead of taking the class during the summer, they just take the test that's given towards the end of the summer to see if they qualify for the accelerated classes.
Okay. And then Ann, is it safe to say that if the course didn't have enrollment that's in your document, it didn't run, so we didn't we didn't stipend a teacher for it, right?
That is correct, unless it was a credit recovery course. And then we try to run that credit recovery course in a way that would be, maybe a teacher would take on an additional student. It would depend on the courses that the students needed.
Okay, I don't understand what you just said.
We try to be very cost conscious.
Sure, of course.
If a student needs that credit of that course to be able to graduate on time with their classmates, then we make sure that there is some way that that student gets to take that course, whether it's an asynchronous course or a synchronous course, or they are actually in a class.
Yeah, because I noticed as an example, what caught my attention is, some of these are pretty well attended, right?
Correct.
The English 9-10, those are well attended in the high school. Some of them are pretty well attended. I was really surprised when we ran a civics course for one student.
That was a credit recovery course.
Yeah. So do we automatically staff to credit recovery regardless of enrollment?
It depends on the course. If the course can be offered asynchronously, then we will offer it that way, and the student will be in a class with a teacher, but will not be participating in that class. They'll be doing the course asynchronously within that classroom. So there's a teacher if there are any questions.
I'm sorry that I didn't understand that. So what I'm just trying to say, if you have like this civics student, whether the kid had to come to the school every day or they were with a teacher remotely, it was just the teacher and the one student, correct?
No. What I was trying to say, Peter, I'm sorry, I was not very clear. Civics would have been a synchronous class because it was social studies, considered social studies. So that student took the course virtually, but that student was assigned to another teacher who may have been teaching a social studies course or an English course. So if that student had questions about the separate course that he was taking, there was a teacher that was assigned to him so that he could get credit or she could get credit for that class.
How does that student get instruction then?
It's as I said, it's an asynchronous course. So
I got it. Okay, thank you. I got it.
Okay, Ms. Hirsch.
Well, I was glad to see that Mr. Scher asked a bunch of the same questions that I already had, so my list will be shorter. Thank you. So I just wanted to ask, one of the discussions, one of the slides mentioned that some students attended less than 20 days.
Correct.
If the summer school ran for 5 weeks, were some of the programs not 5 weeks in length?
Well, the program started on July 6th and ended on August 7th, and July 6th was a Tuesday. So it only ran for 19 days.
Then all the students would have been under 20 days, no?
There was one extra day in case students needed that time to make up.
It also noted that if a student attended less than 80% of the classes, that, you were noting that they would, if they attended more than 80%, they were did better than the students who did not attend at 80%. I'm trying to figure out if a student attended less than 80% of the classes, if they were still able to pass that class. I would sort of assume that there's an attendance requirement for credit recovery.
For the high school, correct. They have to be there a certain amount of time. And if they have, I think it's more than 2 tardies and 2 absences, then they don't earn the credit.
I'd love to sort of see that information at some point, just as long as we are offering these programs. I know, as Mr. Scher said, later in the, we'll be looking at tuition and fees. So I'll leave some of those questions for then, but I want to make sure that we're providing them what they need to have credit recovery and support. But if they're not attending, it sort of doesn't help them.
That is correct.
And then the last question is, I know we've discussed this in the past. If we've invited 900 students who do not have the scores, who are scoring 1 and 2 on the winter, do we ever discuss or ask the parents to let us know why they've declined the invite?
I do not know if the individual building principals ask why or not. I do not, but that's a very good question. We could probably send out a survey and ask them why they didn't. A number of parents did contact me and said that they really were excited that it was being offered, but their children were just burned out, and they were too, and they wanted to have the summer off so their children could play and just do whatever they wanted. They wanted to give their children a rest.
Well, I'd love to sort of know the answer because I think it can help us build the summer school to be a more enriching and fun environment that students want to attend to help support their learning if they're, learning gaps. So if you have the ability to do that, I'd love to sort of see why they were not attending. And I know we talked about looking at benchmark data when you get that. So I will cede to somebody else with questions.
All right, Ms. Kowalski.
So I had some questions regarding the differences in the program. So you said that the satellite program at JC, which was had a little bit of a longer day. Those students you said you think performed slightly higher than those that didn't go to the satellite school where their day was shorter and they stayed relatively stagnant. Did I hear that right?
Yes, I would say you got that right. But as I was talking with Trish, the principal at Julian Curtis, we really think it's because the children knew the teachers. They were used to being in that school. They were comfortable. It was like just continuing, and they really enjoyed their summer because they were with their peers and they were with teachers that they knew. So we think that might have had an impact. I don't know, but that's just my observation. And in talking with Mrs. McGuire, that's what we think. And the teachers probably would say the same thing.
No, I think that's probably a fair assessment. And that's so I'm wondering going forward in taking away this information, if it's something that we could consider building out for a summer school program to make them all satellite schools. And that's part one. And then part two is, did you notice that there was a higher percentage of children that took summer school that went to because they had the satellite school option as opposed to overall?
I would not be able to make that determination. I don't know. But we have, Dr. Jones and I have talked about it, and that's why we're excited to talk about new and transformative ways to deliver summer learning as we move forward. And one of our new program administrators at central office, Tara, will be working with us to design some new things based on the data that we have and based on her experiences. And, it's always nice to have some new outlook and some new ideas as we move forward.
And my last question is, I noticed that the day for summer school is relatively short.
Yeah.
It could be an hour or it could be 2 hours. And I guess this is just a balancing act of what makes most sense. But have we given any thought to a longer day of instruction and enhancing and maybe breaking it up so there's a little bit more, there's some learning time and some fun time and some learning time, but I'm wondering if the hour a day, if you just did language arts or if you just did math, is enough for that period of time to actually make a difference for those children that we're trying to enhance their academic achievement, which is why they're going in the first place. Because it takes a lot of work to get a kid out for an hour a day. And I'm just wondering if it makes sense and what the data would say, and also versus the cost of running a little bit longer program during the day.
In 2019-20, we did have a longer program. It was from 8:30 until I believe 2 o'clock for the elementary program. And because of COVID and because of the mitigating circumstances that we've had the past 2 years, we believe that this would be something that children would participate in, yet would not be overwhelmed by being in an synchronous setting as they were last year or this year, after coming out from being in a very, I don't want to say in a pretty rigid pretty rigid school year programming, that they had to stay within their own cohorts. They could not, we had a lot of separations on the buses, a lot of different mitigating circumstances. So we felt that this was a good middle ground for students to be able to come, do some, see some of their peers, do some socializing, use their skills, build upon their skills, and yet still have time during the day to go and just be kids.
No, and I don't disagree with that at all. And that makes sense. I think it'd just be interesting, excuse me, to see if there is any significant, if there's anything you can tell from the difference of a longer day versus a shorter day. And maybe the shorter day is the best result, right? It's focused, it's direct, and then kids get to be kids, and that's all they need. I'm just curious if you see any differences between the two.
Oh, we'll have to go back and look at the data and see if there is any difference.
All right, thanks. Ms. Hirsch.
Just as a note, I know when we had the school day longer over the summer, there was board discussion then about allowing students just to come for math or just to come for ELA, because to have a student come for math if they didn't need math wasn't always productive for them. So it would be very interesting to sort of see how that has helped their test scores now, that if you're having them there for both, or were they allowed this year to only come for ELA or only come for math?
They were allowed to come for only ELA or only math, but the majority of the students chose to be there for both the classes.
Yeah. So that might be a data point to take a look at, because I know in the past, that was something we as a board have discussed.
And this is Peter Bernstein again. So I do want to say I'm glad we've moved away from the replicating the full school day model. I think it's probably a lot better for the kids to come and get the instruction that they absolutely need. I do like the idea of a little fun time in there too, but it's not camp at school, sadly. So I guess, keep doing this, and I suppose the board would get an update before you actually plow right into next summer school. So I guess we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that at the chair meeting for agenda planning purposes, but I would presume you'd need to come in the spring unless there's a cost element, and then you need to do that as part of the budget.
Yes, indeed.
And
Thank
time
you.
is ticking away. Thank you very much. All right, with that, we're going to move on to our next item, which is the strategic plan update. Mr. Scher.
There's really not a lot to report from when we last met reported out to you guys in June. One update, which you can see on the screen. This is new, fresh data. You'll all recall we have a strategic dashboard of strategic measures. The board has had these for a long time, and this board readopted those in June, I guess 18 months ago, or maybe 2 years ago. So it exists until it gets replaced. Just what you're looking at here is the 13 strategic measures. The top 5 are academic. The middle 5 are about student wellness. It provides a balanced view of not only a kid academically, but how do we think about kids being whole people? And then the ones on the bottom are known as operational or more stakeholder satisfaction. All the ones marked in gray have not been updated because for a lot of reasons, there's not new data. Some of that does have new data from last year. So we'll ask the administration to provide the new data. The 2 ones in the top left are new because we just got new data from the state. If you haven't looked at the data from the state, you should go look at it. You should also, feel free to talk to the people at the Connecticut State Department of Education in the Innovation Office. It's an amazing group of people, and they're really, really helpful, and they're very straightforward. And I find them to be very direct and honest, really easy to work with. But the new update is on a percentile rank, which is in ELA and mathematics. They did not publish data in science. The new ranking is 81. Mathematics, it's 87. Mathematics is effectively the same as it was before, just so you know. A number before was, in terms of percentile rank, was 86.4, which gave us an 86. Now it's 86.5, which gives us an 87. If you move out 1 decimal, we haven't moved that needle at all. What percentile means is is that there are 13% of the districts in Connecticut perform better than we do. That's what that winds up meaning. The target of the long-term plan, which we're now in year 6 or 7, was to be at 92, the 92nd percentile. And on English language arts, unfortunately, other people outperformed us during the COVID year, and we went from 83 down to 81. Just in terms of putting that in the reason that the prior superintendents, when this was originally set, picked percentile rank is percentile takes into account everything else everybody's dealing with. It kind of puts you on a good comparative position based upon, so like in our case, we say we dealt with COVID, everybody else dealt with COVID, that normalizes that by using percentile rank. It takes it out. If you could just go to the appendix, one more, Mike, this is just the supplemental slide. If anybody's interested in the raw numbers behind that, here are the wrong numbers. Trend in mathematics for a number of years, we were increasing. And in 2020, there was no data because there was no testing. In 2021, we kind of slid all the way back down the hill to where we were in 2015. And in English language arts, the idea at the time was when the board asked the administration to focus on getting mathematics up, we asked them not to take their eye off the ball on ELA. It hasn't moved around too much, but the trend is not, it's bounced. It's not always been great. So anyway, that's the latest data. And that's the update on the strategic dashboard of the board. We'll work with the administration to get the other, can you go back, Mike? We'll work to get these other ones that are in gray updated. We should, by the way, now have college prep rigor, which is based on AP scores, because those are now out. So we can see how our kids did on that. And they've always done really well on that, which is why it's marked green, because we're always above target there. And then the ones in the middle, some of those came out of the Panorama survey. They're questions out of the Panorama survey. And we were in a strategy committee. Ms. Hirsch asked the other day, Dr. Jones, about the data. That survey was taken in April or May. And I'm sure we have the data, but Dr. Jones will get that to us whenever they're ready. So that's the update.
Thank you, Michael. If you could make sure this gets posted, I don't know that anybody at the table has seen this before than Mr. Scher. So if we could get that posted, that would be helpful. Peter, the numbers you had there for the percentiles, does that take into account the remote versus live versus what they have, like 6 categories of test results this year?
They've actually got 3. And I spoke to the people up there to say, just tell me how to understand this data, because we don't want to misinterpret this data. The good news for us is that they give you a whole district number, and the whole district number is, with the exception of 11th grade, for us, it was, all people who were in, and it measures, in building to in buildings, because that's what we were year to year, right? It actually works out a little better, because when you look at our whole numbers of kids who are in the remote school, those numbers are lower than the in building. So they also told us within the next 2 weeks, there's data available. The disaggregated data is not yet available to districts. They told us that our district, two weeks from now, the districts will have access to it on EdSite Secure, which is a different version of EdSite. But they advised us on how to do a comparative. As you can imagine, they're trying to make the distinction between the two. I think you can read between the lines. The data is not great for a lot of districts. So, you have to be thoughtful about how you think about it. I think we're going to get a detailed, school by school, grade by grade analysis Dr. Jones talked about that in the last meeting, and I guess we're going to get that sometime in October, and I think it'll illuminate it. For our purposes at the board level, the board's just looking at the whole district. So that number's just the whole district. And I wouldn't, I'd be careful about people extrapolating past that until there's a deeper analysis done by legitimate statisticians because of the point you made. There's special circumstances in the data.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, hearing none, we're going to move on then to our action items. So the first action item is the tuition and fees. I'll make the motion to put it on the table so we can have the discussion. So I move that we approve the fiscal year 23 tuition and fees as presented. Is there a second? Mr. Kelly, thank you. Mr. O'Keefe, we had some discussion last time. Maybe you can walk us through this.
Good evening, everybody. So essentially, this is the tuition fees. We typically will increase at a nominal rate of 2 to 3% to approximate the actual cost of delivery, primarily driven by salaries and supplies. So last year, we recommended an increase of 3%. We're recommending the same for this year.
All right, discussion. All right, Ms. Hirsch.
Hi, Sean. I wanted to ask a quick question. Under the 22-23 proposed rates under item C for pre-K to 5 summer programs. I see the fee has gone up only $40, but the program listed there seems to be running longer than it did this year. This year was 5 weeks and 4 hours long. So I just wanted to make sure that is that $40 bump going to be enough to cover the cost for the extra days and hours proposed for next year?
It may not be. I mean, we have funds in the RRR account to offset any shortfall. So, but let me get into that a little bit more.
Thanks.
Mr. Scher.
Sadly, I don't think we can. I thought this would be simple and we would be able to vote on this, but if you'll notice, this fee schedule doesn't match our course catalog. There are items missing. So, and that's what I was raising with Ann a minute ago. We need to get an update because we just need to get that crosswalk. So I appreciate that this is on the floor. It probably needs one more turn of the crank. It's missing health and wellness.
Health and wellness.
It's missing software research. It's missing bread test only. There's another 1 or 2 it's missing too. And I realized it was just rolled over year to year to year.
It was.
Something just happened.
But let me see if for those particular courses, what was charged. And you're right.
My guess is it's following. Well, I don't know what they're charged because there's different ones. And I want to vote on this. I mean, I haven't had the time or the energy to convince my fellow board members. Some of these courses are like super expensive. And I would, and we're not generating a lot of revenue off of them. So as a gap closing measure, vis-a-vis the last conversation about SBAC performance, other than, I mean, if you're free and reduced lunch, I guess you could take it for $48 or something. But if not, and some of these courses are hundreds of dollars. I'm dying to know to what degree, and I don't think Ann knows because she doesn't know why people don't attend, what happened. As an example, my daughter this year took, and I rarely know about this stuff because the genius of my wife takes care of it. I try to stay out of it because I'll just screw it up. My daughter took an SAT prep class, and normally my kids are tutored for that, but this one's taking a Kaplan course, and the thing costs like $600. And it's, online, totally focused, in prep for the PSAT. Our course is $493. I can tell you, most parents are not going to take ours. They're going to take the Kaplan one if it's the same price. I'm sitting there wondering, where can we spend money that's high impact? If we're only generating a few tens of thousands of dollars on a $200 million budget, on prep, and we're a college prep high school, and we have the ability to run these courses, I don't know why we wouldn't make that number like $100 and get a lot of kids prepped for PSAT, SAT, ACT to succeed. I don't know why we would try to compete at the same price as Kaplan. That just doesn't make any sense to me. There's some other courses in here that are not credit recovery that I think are really pretty cool and kids would take. I mean, chemistry, $1,000. I'm like, aren't we trying to do more STEM? I mean, I would love to see these fees for everybody lowered because we're not generating a lot of revenue for it. And we know darn well if we could get kids to take these during summer programs. And to the point, I think Miss Kowalski made, the success at JC was because they were taking classes with teachers that they know. So why wouldn't we want to try to encourage them to take them from teachers that they know in the high school? And by the way, not all bad. Gets more teachers to have something to do during the summer if they so choose, and they can earn a stipend. So I'm trying to figure out what's the downside in all of that. But I would rather see us cut these fees, particularly for courses that would really have a great impact. Not, I'm interested in taking, I'm going to have a bad example, computer programming or something, music, educate. That's a bad, somebody's going to be upset I said that. But I think there are certain courses that have higher impacts on students. And I don't know why we wouldn't be lowering the bar to get higher participation and try it for a year and see if it had an impact for our kids. That would be what I would suggest to the board. But anyway, this thing's got to come back anyway because we're missing some.
So before I ask you a question, Sean, I wish we had a $200 million budget. It's about 170 million, what we could do with $30 million. I guess, Sean, I want to ask what the impact of pushing this off to the October meeting would be. Is there any reason we need to get anything out early? I think usually it's the pre-K registration that we're looking to get out, but I don't think that needs to go out that early.
I think we're okay pushing it off.
Okay, great. In the vein of what Mr. Scher was discussing, I think we maybe could discuss. I get the differential between like fees we're charging for expensive courses. I presume either you or maybe Dr. Carabillo can tell us why chemistry is $1,000, but I'm going to guess there's additional costs in running that course. I have no problem maybe lowering fees for courses that are for credit recovery for kids that are not free reduced lunch. I think where we stand though are if something's an elective, we're not even covering our costs with the summer school program. It's really not a program meant to generate a revenue. We're hoping to cover our costs. And so maybe there's a formula we can come up with and try to figure out where we have some flexibility in the fees, or at least for those students who have challenges that are not free and reduced lunch to give the administration the ability to make some exceptions there to get those kids enrolled. But if you could address the question of why courses are priced the way they are, I think I talked to Ms. Kowalski earlier today, and I know it's a question she had on her mind too. So I think
actually, Karen sent me an email earlier today and asked that very question, and I did consult with Ann. And like chemistry, for example, has a lab, so it's a longer course. Has, as you would expect, chemistry would have supplies that are unique to that particular course. So there are reasons for that course to be more expensive in that it's longer and has unique supplies.
I know geometry A is another one. It's $936, and it's an outlier. So
I think that one's a longer course as well. Is that correct, Ann?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. So I think the takeaway here is that it would be good for you to align this back to the courses that you're actually offering, making sure they're all on here. If there are courses that are on here that you're not offering, setting a fee for them, no harm, no foul, but courses that are missing need to be added. And then if you could look into the question of the fees and whether there's some flexibility there for students so that we can maybe increase enrollment in some of the core courses. Mr. Scher.
Yeah, just so I can be specific, I don't know why these engineering. I mean, it's crazy to me if somebody has to do credit recovery for PE, they got to pay $500 for it. Or health and wellness. I don't know if you've ever seen our wellness curriculum. You get the same course 4 years in a row. So it's just, and $500 for that on credit recovery, that just doesn't make any sense to me. So as I say, I mean, we're already burning on the summer school program, $732K. So, and our generated revenue is like 25. I don't know what we're doing. So I would hope you guys would figure out how to take, to Mr. Bernstein's point, at least the credit recoveries. And I don't know why geometry with a geometry book and writing something on a board costs $900. It just doesn't. We should just pause for a minute, not just roll over what we've done.
Ms. Hirsch.
So would you prefer, I mean, I know I have a couple of additional questions, but if this is coming back to us, would you prefer us to just send those off to you so that you can address them in the next report in October?
Yes.
That's fine.
All right, so the motion on the table is to accept the report. I made the motion, so maybe we could get a second motion to table this until the October business meeting. Yeah, all right, that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and withdraw the motion. The second was Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kelly, do you object to my withdrawal?
I do not. I withdraw my second.
All right, this item is withdrawn and we'll put it on for the October meeting. Hang on one second. I just want to make note of it for agenda planning purposes. Thank you, everyone. The next item is the staff vaccination policy. Ms. Stowe, do you want to make the motion to put this on the table?
Sure. I'd like to make the motion to approve the staff vaccination policy 4118.239/4218.239 as proposed.
Is there a second? Ms. Hirsch, discussion, Ms. Stowe?
Sure. I have the joy of sitting in for Ms. Downey tonight, and I guess I got this job as the former member, chair of the PGC. Just to give you guys back up a little bit, the last meeting we presented a policy just to get it on the table. This is something that we need to have as a policy by September 27th. So we wanted to make sure that we had the first read out to you soon. We even then at that time sort of said, please provide feedback, and you guys did, which was really helpful, was to try to keep the policy a little bit more nimble, especially as executive orders keep changing. And in fact, one already has, so that we can stop revisiting it. Also, I think it should be noted that in these 2 weeks, or I should say Christina, on the behalf of the committee, sent to and discussed this with the town attorney, and they are signed off on this policy as revised. So that's that. Karen, would you like to add anything?
I think that, Christina had sent information to the board to let the board know as to why she made this, well, not she, but PGC had made this revision. Is that, because the executive orders do keep changing, it's directing us towards regulations, which really is, it focused on HR and things that are not really our nature. So it's something for the superintendent to work with making those regulations. So I'm not sure. The only question I would have is, I guess, if those are going to be drafted or are already drafted based on what we are going to vote on later. But
Ms. Kowalski.
So I just wanted a couple of clarification questions, which is the first are with respect to those teachers that do not want to be vaccinated and they have to get tested. How onerous is it for them to go and actually get tested? And what do they have to show? And how do they know that it's covered in costs? I just want to, I know Peter talked about this earlier. I just want a little bit more clarification about what the process is for teachers going forward on this.
So we've been communicating to teachers. There was an emergency meeting with the state on Monday where they had some new implementation guidance. So we worked over the last 48 hours trying to get that out to teachers. They did add the state testing site so that as long as they go to a state testing site, they do ask if they have health insurance, but their health insurance will not bill that back, or they can't bill that back to the individual, and it is covered. If they choose to go to a testing site like CVS or Walgreens, we don't know. Because if you just walk in and you're symptomatic, they will give you a test. But if you try to do that every single week, if you go back a couple of weeks ago, they were saying it's likely that CVS or Walgreens would start charging. But as long as they use the state testing site, then it's covered now as of this week.
And going back to the question on running it by the state attorney, I noticed that there's language in this executive order that's actually requiring us as a board to pass this. Is that something, what was the question of to the town attorney as to what the legitimacy of that we had to enact this, the executive order requires us to enact it? I just want to understand what the question was posed to the town attorney and what was the advice given.
I wasn't a party to that call. Christina spoke with Abby and they went and she reviewed the policy and she said this was satisfactory and that we should pass it.
Further discussion? All right, so the motion on the table. Mr. Kelly.
Yes, thank you. Anytime anything's required, mandatory, I certainly have concerns about it. And it is an executive order. And I did reach out to our GEA president to say, are you okay with this? Her answer to me was that she's very happy with the way she's working with the superintendent on this issue. All things are being addressed. And as I said, I'm concerned when we're forced to do anything. She's okay with it. So I guess I'll be okay with it too.
Mr. Scher.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say, I don't know who did it. I guess it's Christina. Thank you for actually listening. As you know, I've objected to these policies that are written by the board that are super prescribed in areas where there's no qualifications of anybody on the board to actually write those policies. So referring it to the state and following the statutory mandate as us as an agent of the state, I wanted to say thank you to whoever was intelligent enough to actually now write something that's 3 sentences long, and it doesn't have to come back to the board and clog up the board's agenda, although thankfully I won't be here. So thank you for whoever did that. The second thing is the only reason I can get behind this, I had understood that there would be no expense to our employees for this mandate. It's a mandate. It's a mandate from us as an employer to employees. We can't hide behind the fact that it's coming from the governor. We are the employer of record for our employees. And I can't imagine voting for something where we're not taking care of our employees on a mandate we're setting on them. That's about workplace conditions. I did hear Lil Perone, the new GEA president. That's the largest union with 900 people. I would love to go out and talk to the other ones, but I've heard no objections from the unions. So I don't worry about our employees because they're represented by unions, very powerful, well-funded national unions with big lobbying organizations. So if they're not complaining about it, and then I assume that means that all of the rank and file of the unions are okay with this and their leadership is representing that. And I think from GEA, I heard that tonight. I expect that's true of GOSA because I've heard nothing from GOSA about this. I expect that's true of LIUNA. I've heard nothing from LIUNA about this. I have heard some employees. There is one, so I'm prepared to vote for this based upon those conditions. If any of those things, those assumptions and representations have been made aren't true, I'm going to want to bring this thing back and revote it. But I'm going to support it based upon those expectations because we have this statutory responsibility to do that.
Dr. Francis.
Hello?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, good. Sorry. My question was just to go back to the regulation. I think one of the issues that came up at the last meeting was making sure that there was an easy way for our staff to be able to see what was required of them, what the steps are, consequences, whatever it may be. If we're taking that out of the policy, I think it's really important to make sure we've got regulations quickly available. Is that something that was supplied by our state board, or whatever it's called, I forget now. I believe I've already forgotten. The same people that give us our policy drafts. Is there something like that that's already been provided, or do we have something ready to go? Because this is sort of an immediate issue.
We have sent out the document to our teachers to let them know everything that we learned again over the last 48 hours, because there were some changes. And they understand, and in working with GEA especially, wanted to understand, what does it mean if you don't comply? You can have a medical exemption, you can have a religious exemption, but you still must test on an ongoing basis. If they are vaccinated, we have to not only now collect the vaccine card information, but we also have an attestation form that was brand new this week. Our staff are doing great getting those in to make sure that not only they have a card on file, but that the attestation is saying that it's actually legitimate and valid. So that was new this week, but all that's gone out to our staff. And we're also, obviously, HR is working closely with town HR, because a lot of our bargaining units fall on that side. And that's one confusing thing today that will be in Greenwich Times probably tomorrow, where the town is not implementing the same level of testing. However, if they're on the town bargaining unit and they are in our schools, they still must get tested because they're in the schools and they fall under the school.
And that, I'm sorry, that will be in sort of a regulation somewhere as well, where someone could look it up.
I can certainly turn it into regulation literally very, very quickly. If this passes tonight, I could probably do that tomorrow. We're being very cautious this week because stuff changes so regularly. And as an example, we have staff that have asked, okay, I put in for my COVID testing. I'm trying to get tested today. What if the testing companies can't handle the demand and they don't have the results back by Monday or Tuesday? So it's going to take us a week or two to see what the kinks are across the state as we implement this. It's quite complex.
Yeah, I'm sure. Thank you.
Ms. Hirsch?
So in the interim, I know this policy specifically stipulates that there will be a regulation drafted. It's, important for us to make sure that our staff does understand the details as we know them. I know that there are not a lot of the details are confusing. But if there is an interim period between the time that we pass this, if we pass this policy and the regulation is not drafted, I assume that there will be some leeway for our staff, if possible, in that regards. I know we want to keep everyone safe, but it's also, this is their livelihood. And also our students rely on them on the daily to be in schools. And the last question I actually had was, I think I just forgot what that last question I had was. So I will, if it comes back, I'll let you know.
Ms. Kowalski?
So on the point, and I'm sorry I missed the GEA's comments earlier tonight, but have we, with respect to teachers and expressing grievances to HR, have we heard of teachers that are something similar to what we heard this evening, upset about this and the possibility that teachers are just going to say, I quit and walk out? And then we have an issue of filling classrooms with teachers and teachers we don't have because I've been told we have teacher shortages.
Well, let me just remind us too, it's not just teachers, it's every employee in the district. So we could have bus drivers, we could have custodial issues, but right now we're not seeing that based on the level of submissions that have gone into our nurses. We think it's going to be very high. The challenge will be for those people that do have exemptions that are trying to get their testing this week. It has to be PCR testing. You can't do a home test, just an over the counter. It has to be from a lab. That was also just updated for clarity this week. It'll be that's going to be the next tricky part, is getting all of those tests in. Now, if a teacher or a custodian or a bus driver is totally non-compliant, they cannot be at our schools, cannot be inside the school. So if they choose not to be vaccinated, then they have to go have the weekly testing. If they choose not to be vaccinated and not to be tested, then there is what they call, from a union standpoint, progressive discipline. So the first day that their results aren't there, it's day without pay. That's step one. You remind the employee they have to be compliant. Goes all the way through day 4. By day 5, they're considered non-compliant, and you have to you start to move for termination. Some districts have set it at 3 days. That's where it's a little bit different. Obviously, we use Tom Mooney's firm is the one that does a lot of the guidance for us across the state with the superintendent's organizations. And they've been very clear that it is the law and we must comply. Staff must comply.
No, and look, I understand. I'm along the lines of, Mr. Kelly. It's difficult to swallow the fact that someone's telling you something to do, but I understand, and why I can get behind this is simply because what we're being told and being advised that this is the law and we must do this and we must comply. I get that. And I would just behoove this board that the moment that changes, that we get back into this and change it quickly. And we take those steps. And maybe we don't need to because of the way this policy is drafted, which I think that's a good thing. I'm glad Ms. Downey did it that way. But yeah, this whole thing just makes me really, really uncomfortable. And, obviously it's an executive order, but it doesn't make it right.
Tony, just 2 quick things. One is you say changes are coming. That's coming from the state, right? Their guidance is changing.
Yes, the guidance that we got this week, like added the attestation form and things, it comes from the state.
Okay. And the other was, I think the implementation date is September 27th, which of course is 3 days before the governor's orders are set to expire. But I understand the state legislature is meeting next week to discuss extensions. So I guess you have a target date of the 27th that you have to do this by.
Yes, we have to start implementing.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Scher.
I just wanted to clarify something that said, because the penalties for employees not being able to do this, that's not coming from the state, correct? That's actually penalty language per the superintendent, per the contracts with the various unions, correct?
It's through the contracts and also obviously on the advice of attorney on how do you navigate an employee who may refuse to comply.
But it's not from the state. There's nothing in this. Is there anything in the governor's executive orders or direction from the Connecticut State Department of Education regarding penalties for employees on noncompliance?
I don't know what you mean by penalty.
Well,
Obviously,
a penalty would be, Tony, I think we all know what we're talking about. A penalty would be day 1, you're docked pay. You just referenced it. I think of that as a penalty for noncompliance. I'm asking if there's any guidance or directive from the state regarding when somebody doesn't comply, or is that strictly a local decision and you've decided to follow what's in existing labor contracts?
we do look at the labor contracts, but we don't have, other than I will say GEA has actually a pandemic line in their contract. They're the only one that had that previously addressed, but it does not address a vaccine requirement or testing requirement. But what it does do is there are certain types of leave, and if somebody is just not complying with the governor's executive order, that they're not sick, so they can't use the sick day.
Okay. Well, these things are called condition. This is in legal terms in a labor contract. This is called a condition of employment. I think that's referenced in the state's executive orders. These are called conditions of employment. Conditions of employment are you got to show up on time, et cetera, et cetera. That's a well-established legal principle. So what I think I hear you saying is, because I know in the GEA contract, there's an entire procedure on there's language in it talking about meeting conditions of employment. And if someone doesn't meet conditions of employment, what the penalties are, how they'll be notified, how they'll be given an opportunity to grieve it, how they'll be arbitrated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess my question is, I think I haven't heard it's from the state, so I'm hearing it's going to be in line with these contracts and that's how it's going to be implemented, correct?
I'm not sure I understand your question, because when you look at somebody being on time, that's a condition of employment, but it is not the law. There is not an executive order or law that says a teacher must show up on time. So there is a process in the contract for that. There is not a process in the contract for a teacher who chooses not to follow the law.
I'm really worried about the legal exposure. It'll show up. Either the union's going to grieve it or not. We're going to wind up in arbitration or not. I've said my piece on this. I think you should get to a safe harbor on whatever regulations you're writing. I would not make them up out of thin air. I would have them follow something that we already have in place. Otherwise, we're going to wind up with a bunch of lawsuits, and we should be very careful about doing that. I don't want money spent on lawsuits. I want to spend money on teachers in the classroom. That's just me.
All right, Dr. Francis.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, go ahead.
Sorry. So going back to respond, one thing that Karen Hirsch had brought up was, some leniency. I can understand leniency if someone's gotten tested, but there's a delay in their results. I think that certainly makes sense. So I'm not sure, I know that's going to be difficult, and you've noticed that, you've noted that. So I think that certainly is something to be aware of. But I think that, this executive order has been out there for a long time. This discussion's been going on for a long time. So I think beyond that, I'm not sure a lot of leniency would make sense. And I don't know if the executive order allows for that. The second point I would bring up is that while the executive order may not continue forever, we don't know when that will be over. I'm not convinced that I would automatically want to rescind our requirement. For example, as a physician or anybody who works in the hospital, we are all required, and any group can choose to require should they want to do that. And I think it's something we should seriously consider for the health of our students and our other staff members, that this is a form of protection that we are offering as part of being part of our society. And if that's something that we feel would be warranted in terms of keeping our staff and students safe, that's something we take seriously. And then I think that was pretty much it. Thanks.
All right, I think Ms. Kowalski had your hand up. Otherwise, we're going to call the question.
Yeah, I just had one question, which is the clarification on just the sanctions for not complying. I'm just unclear of where they're coming from. If Dr. Jones, you're drafting them because this is on your own, or if you're pulling this from a document. I'm really unclear about where we're pulling the sanctions from for non-compliance of the policy.
So part of it comes from, we do webinars with Tom Mooney's firm, with the Connecticut State Department of Education. The way that every district will implement will be slightly different because we all have different contracts. We have different types of employees. For instance, in Greenwich, we have contracts on the town side that where in most school districts, all of our contracts would be on the school side. There are lots of differences. The progressive aspect is really collectively, it's a lot of superintendents discussing how do we actually implement a termination for an employee. What we do know is it has to be progressive, in that people need to know how you're going to move to termination if they're non-compliant. So we have weekly meetings and discuss, okay, what does it look like? And I'll give you an example. I had a district, I think you might have asked the question, do we have anyone that's not going to be compliant? There was a superintendent on the call who, last week, a teacher had already said, I'm not going to comply. It is a position that's a hard to fill position. They posted the job even before we've gone through the first testing week, so that if the teacher's non-compliant next week, hopefully they'll have applications to move forward. Our last step says that I'd have to get the exact language, is to move towards termination. And that termination, you're going to have to go back to the contract, go back to the union leaders, and what does that process look like for every union? So yes, it's progressive. Ours is a 5-day, Bridgeport's a 3-day. Some districts may do 2 days. Every district has to figure out how you're going to meet that termination aspect for somebody who's non-compliant.
Okay.
Because when they're not in the classroom, that, you know, the challenge is that they're non-compliant, they can't be at school. If you have a physics teacher, you have a literacy teacher, a special education teacher, and they're not with their children to teach, you know, you can't sit back and have a process that takes a month with no teacher with our children. So I think that's what we're all grappling with across the state, is how to implement it, where of course we're going to be reasonable with the teacher who didn't get their test results back for some weird reason. But we have to be compliant, and they've told us that.
Okay, so for the progression, you're making the decision, and then when it gets to the point of termination, you're referring back to the contract.
Well, progressive discipline means you have to give them a warning. That's in every, I mean,
No, I got all that, but I'm saying you're setting what that progression looks like.
I'm setting that progression based on what I know everybody in the state is doing, or at least in our region. How do we get to the point where we're meeting what the attorneys have told us to do?
All right, I'm going to go ahead and call the question. So the motion on the table is to accept policy 4118.239/4218.239. It's the staff vaccination policy. I'm going to do a roll call. So Bernstein's a yes. Francis?
Yes.
Hirsch?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Kowalski?
Reluctantly, yes.
Scher?
Yes.
And Stowe?
Yes.
All right, that passes 7-0. Thank you. On to our last action item. It's the financial and staffing report. I'll make the motion to put on the table. I move that we accept the financial and staffing report as presented. Is there a second for that? Ms. Stowe, thank you. Sean, take it away.
Okay, first of all, I just want to say that the staffing and vacancy reports are not in the package. They will be presented at the October meeting. Just due to some personnel issues, those two reports were not able to be finished in time. So let me get started with the operating fund. So I think I'll do a quick recap. I think everybody kind of knows these numbers. So at the end of June of 2021, our actual plus encumbrances, remaining encumbrances ended up at $163.1 million. That compares to our budget of 163.5. So we closed with a relatively small surplus of about 317,000. On an attainment basis, we achieved 99.8% of our budget. So good story there. School lunch, you know, we had a tough year. Overall revenue missed by about $1 million. Attributable to significantly lower cash sales, under by 3.1. But then because of all the free meals, we far exceeded our budget on state reimbursements. We were better than budget by 2.1. So that the 3.1 under and the 2.1 over, that's the $1 million that we missed overall. Our expense line came in lower than budget by about $700K. Driven by lower salaries and lower food and supplies costs. So before the town contribution, we had a net loss of about 489,000. With the town contribution, we were at about 269. Compared to where we were looking at food services earlier in the year, say around mid-year, we thought we would have done worse for the year, but we actually did pretty well. And it's primarily attributable to two things. One, the state reimbursements far exceeded what we even thought. And the second thing is we were able to move to fund the transportation for food delivery to the ESSER fund. Then move on to capital. We continue to make progress in capital for the year. Overall, our capital available balance, excluding any of the additions for full year 22, closed at 13.5 million, a decrease of a little over $5 million from the May report. For the year, our overall available balance decreased 24.4 million, or about 64% of the budgets pre-22. So I think a pretty good year on the capital, and we're continuing to keep that focus up to get that work done. Questions?
All right, Ms. Hirsch.
In reference to the Exhibit 6 capital improvement project status, We have projects that are open capital projects. I had a quick question because FY 18, we have 18, number of 18 projects, 18. Non-active projects, 12, number of projects, projects 6. Every year we have that between 18 and 22 here. How many of those from 18 to 19 are carried over, et cetera? Because at the bottom you have the subtotal, but I would assume if some of those projects are active and did not close out in that year, it would be
the reason we
included in the
have-
number of projects the following year.
Yeah, the reason we have some active projects are they're part of a bundled funding. So once we finish all of the projects within a bundle, then we can take those off the chart.
So basically my question is when you have the subtotal of the projects over the past 5 years is 269, some of those are carryovers from the year before. So it's not 269 actual projects. It could be less by whatever was active from the year before. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I was just trying to figure out based on, to go back and look at the numbers, I might have a question at some point.
Okay.
All right. Hey, Sean, Peter Bernstein. While we're on capital, once again, I want to extend my thanks to the entire team. Please thank them for me. You guys continue to drive these down, close these projects out, and it's good to see. I guess I just want to point out, but I'll do it in the form of a question. So for the fiscal year 22, which is the year we're in, it looks like we still have about 52% of the available budget. Now, I note this was as of August 17th, so I presume the numbers probably come down a little bit. This is money for projects that take more than 1 year, correct? I just want to make sure I understand why that's there.
Correct. So there's a lot of things that go into this. One is, you could have a major project that, is multi-year. Second thing is getting certain supplies has been difficult this summer for some of the projects. So so the funding, that $15.5 million for full year 22. So that funding just became available on July 1. So we're starting to work it, and this is pretty typical that we'd still have such a figure at this point.
Thank you. If we could change direction, I want to talk about the general fund revenue. So the exhibit 2, which is the general fund revenue as of June 30th, 2021. So this is the closeout for the last fiscal year. I know we had zeroed out educational cost sharing. We weren't sure we were going to get any. It looks like we got about $481,000. SPED excess cost grant, which was also zeroed out, we got about $650,000. So the general fund return last year, just to make sure I understand this, was 2.5 million as opposed to the about 896,000 and change we expected.
Right.
Okay, so I do have a question on that. Well, I mean, good news, we gave the town back more money than we expected to. Do we have any sense of what the state is using these days for the educational cost sharing model? And I mean, SPED excess cost is based on a formulaic thing that we have no control over, but education cost sharing, are we zeroed out again for next year? Or did we actually put a number in our budget with the expectation we were going to get that?
Well, I know the ECS, the Education Cost Sharing Grant, that's the one, if you recall, was going to be phased out for certain districts, including Greenwich, over, I think it was a 4-year period, and they ended up, saying that they're going to phase it out over 10. So we are still getting some, not a lot, but it is being phased out.
All right, thank you. All right, any other questions or discussion on the financial and staffing report? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. So the motion on the table is to accept the financial and staffing report as presented. So we'll do a roll call. Bernstein's a yes. Francis?
Yes.
Hirsch?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Kowalski? Karen?
Yes, but you called it a staffing report and
A
that's
financial
not,
and it's financial and staffing report.
okay,
That's the formal name.
okay, even though it doesn't have the staffing in it.
Yeah, even though it
Gotcha,
doesn't have
okay.
the staffing in it, as presented.
Yes.
Okay, you're a yes, and Stowe.
Yes.
All right, that passes 6-0 with Downey and Cher absent. Thank you. All right, so that brings us to agenda planning. So I guess we'll talk, Tony, at our next chair meeting about the summer stats. So once we have that, we could get that information. We'll have to make sure there's a program update on for the spring for planning for next summer. And then we'll be adding the tuition and fees to the October meeting. So if there's nothing else, Mr. Kelly, did you have a motion you wanted to make? Is there anything else? Okay, Ms. Hirsch.
I just wanted to ask, I know in our, at our last meeting, the special education audit update listed several reports within the project milestones. I know I see two of the reports listed on our agenda plan. But I didn't know the accountability report in November and the second one in March. Are we going to be adding those as written reports? It was listed in the report last week.
We can at this point. Those are so far out that I don't know that I'd want to try to push them on, but
November is right around the corner.
somebody should make note of them.
One
Wait, this-
question.
Yep, Ms. Kowalski.
So I, on the special ed audit report, I thought last go around, we were going to get updated on the timelines and the metrics and all of that, and that was going to be presented to the board. Will that be ready to be presented at the next meeting?
I don't know that that's on the agenda plan for the next meeting, so we'll have to.
It's not, but what I'm saying is it something that, I mean, I think sooner rather than later, we should see what the timeline is for when those things are going to be completed. And I believe we were told that those were in the works and they'd be presented. So I don't think it'd be a big thing a time-consuming thing to present. It'd just be something to present to the board.
It was the action planning documents.
We did get the timeline at our last meeting, but we'll discuss that in the chair meeting and figure out when it's appropriate. If you look at our October agenda, it's pretty jam-packed already, so
No,
we'll just have to figure out how to balance that out.
I get that, but for clarification's sake, we did get a timeline, but we got an overall timeline. We didn't get a timeline on the specific things where they were being implemented of the 28 action items. You know, we got an overall grand scheme plan, and what I'm talking about are the 28 items that are being implemented and the timelines that are being put forward. I think the board needs to see those. And that's my suggestion, is that those be presented to the board sooner rather than later, so we understand the timeline of that. And I think the community would like to know that as well.
We'll take that up at the chair meeting, and that may be something that can come out. I know they're doing the regular sped updates. They're doing their newsletter as well as got more information on the website than they've ever had before. So there may be a way to do that even quicker, but we'll take that up. All right, with that, Mr. Kelly, motion.
Sure. Summer's over. Welcome fall. This meeting's over. I motion to adjourn.
I will second, although I'm not sure that was a proper haiku. All right, quick roll call for closing us out. Bernstein's a yes. Francis?
Yes.
Hirsch?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Kowalski?
Yeah.
And Stowe.
Yes.
All right, 6-0 to adjourn. Thank you very much, everyone.